Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll see what happens. We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I am a dissident.
Don't move. Move.
I'm saying no. Why you hear Palantir, 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 Palantir? It's not going to be stopped.
Seriously, we need to release the F-scene list.
Turns off.
I am not a church boy.
Turns off.
They're full-on vampires.
They hate our beef. They hate our beef. They hate our beef because our beef is beautiful and theirs is weak.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome one and all to a Thursday midday edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. My name's Keaton Weiss. I hope my mic is on. Can you hear me? If I screw up this time, there's no one here to save me since Russ is on a boat up a river somewhere in Laos. But boy, have we brought in the heavy hitters to help out today. I want to waste no time introducing our special guest, one of two special guests on the day. He is an award-winning journalist and author and the host of System Updates on Rumble. Returning to the show for a second time, Mr. Glenn Greenwald. Glenn, great to see you.
Keaton, good afternoon. It's great to be back on your show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has been a long time. Really appreciate you coming back. I interviewed Janine Eunice on the Jimmy Dore show about a week ago, and I mentioned she was one of the very few consistent civil libertarians who's willing to sort of take it from both the right and the left. And then I realized, no, she's not one of a few. She's one of a couple. It's her and you. That's it.
That's she it. And I, it's funny. We've formed quite
Yeah.
a good friendship over exactly that fact. I'm, very supportive of her work. Had her on my show many times. But yeah, she's the perfect model of what a civil libertarian should be.
Yeah, exactly. And it really is just kind of you and her. It's amazing. It's amazing. And so I can't think of anybody who I'd rather be talking to today, especially in the face of all of this ICE stuff. You actually got your start blogging. This old blog, there's a blast from the past, Unclaimed Territory. The archives are still searchable. You started this way back during the Bush years. This is where you kind of began your journalism career.
It's not that long ago, Kate. You don't have to talk about it like it's 3 centuries ago. It was just like 20 years ago.
20 years
Stop aging me.
All right. It was, yes, you started this back in, 1983. No, this was during the Bush years, and it's called Unclaimed Territory. You also wrote a book around this time called How Would a Patriot Act? Defending American Values from a President Run Amok. So, you got your start sort of critiquing the civil liberty infringements of the Bush years. And now in Trump's second term, we are to this point. This is a scene from Maine that I'm sure everybody's seen before, but this is an ICE agent reminding a woman that by filming him, she's volunteering herself to be placed on a domestic terrorist watch list.
Illegal to record.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Why are you taking my information down?
Because we have a nice little database.
Oh, good.
And now you're considered a domestic terrorist. So
We're videotaping you? Are you crazy?
So, Glenn, you get your start writing about the Patriot Act, writing about the Department of Homeland Security and the surveillance of the Bush era. Trump sort of runs in 2016 as a sort of conservative alternative to that politics. He beats Jeb Bush, heir to the Bush dynasty, and we all thought we were getting something different. Yet, to me, I would love to get your perspective on this, since you've been writing about this now for 45 years. I would like to get
it's on parchment, so it's old.
Yeah, right, exactly. This feels to me more like the Bush years than any time since the Bush years. What do you think about that? About Trump's, assault on civil liberties in all kinds of ways, but especially in this context where we're talking about ICE?
Well, you mentioned Janine, and it's funny because this is one of the things I talked to her about, because I've been at this just a little bit longer than she has. I'm just a tiny bit older than she. And, one of my formative experiences as someone who observes politics, someone who does journalism, is that when I was writing about the war on terror, and I primarily stopped practicing law to write about it full time because I felt like that was the component that was getting too little attention in terms of journalism and our political discourse, was this very aggressive erosion of core civil liberties, but also just like the constitutional framework in the name of the fear of terrorism. And at the time when I began writing about that, there weren't a lot of other people talking about it, at least not nearly to the extent I devoted myself to. And I developed a very big readership, primarily of Democrats and liberals, not even leftists per se, but really kind of like standard, normie liberals and Democrats, because the critique was one that it was aimed at George Bush and Dick Cheney. And then once President Obama ran in 2008, not as an ancillary issue, but a central one, on a promise to undo much of that, if not most of it. And he, went to Harvard Law School, had presented himself as this constitutionalist, a civil libertarian, which maybe in my naivete, I believed a lot of. And then he got into office and very quickly started not only not uprooting it, but fortifying a lot of it, even extending it. And I watched a lot of the same Democrats who were so supportive of any critiques of Bush and Cheney suddenly turn around on a dime and start justifying it. And I think that was really the first up-close look I had about the fact that by no means all, maybe not even most, but many people view the world through a partisan lens. So they ride the Trump wave, being told we're not going to have any more wars, we're going to have a restoration of free speech, confrontation with the deep state. And then they immediately see the policies that they were told were so sinister when done by the Democrats, and they start cheering it, contorting themselves into pretzels in order to justify. But I think that the issue, Keaton, that is so different now is that, I think there was a lot more continuity about these civil liberties abuses, which is generally how it happens. Once the state gets its hands on powers, they don't give them up unless they're forced to. They get more and more. You see continuity through Bush, through Obama, into the first Trump term, into Biden. The difference is, though, that this idea of taking this big war on terror framework that was so threatening to our civil liberties, at least for those terms, it had been primarily, not exclusively, but primarily directed outward, largely at foreign citizens in foreign countries. And the big concern, and remember, this is actually what prompted Edward Snowden to come forward, was what happens if they start using these powers but turning it inward on the American people on domestic soil. That was why he came forward, but it was still somewhat contained. And I think what you're seeing now is the unleashing, the full-scale, unconstrained unleashing of the abuses of the war on terror that had been applied to faraway countries onto American soils and against American citizens. And I think that's what makes it uniquely alarming.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember that being a concern. I remember, I'm sorry to keep doing this to you, but back when I was a teenager, going to my father's friend was a civil rights lawyer at the time, and he would host these town halls about the Patriot Act, and he would raise these concerns. He would say it's only a matter of time. It's a matter of when, not if, these powers get turned against the American people. And there seems to be a marked difference between Trump's second term and his first. Do you think that the lawfare against him, the persecution of the January 6ers, the fact that he kind of ran again as retribution for what they did to him? I mean, he said this on the campaign trail: I am your revenge, I am your retribution. It seems like that is really part of the ethos, which only made this 10 times worse, because it feels like he really does feel as though he and his administration, his inner circle, are at war with a faction of the American public.
It's so interesting. One of my big hobby horses when I was writing about Bush and Cheney and then into Obama was the idea that Obama had sort of left open the possibility that people who broke the law as part of the war on terror, the CIA and Paul Wolfowitz and that whole crowd, could be prosecuted. And he wins and he gets into office. And 2 months later, he says, I hereby decree retroactive immunity for everybody. It's more important that we look forward and not backward.
Right.
I remember being so offended by this. I mean, I wrote a book about it because we imprison huge numbers of people. And by definition, when you prosecute people, you're looking backward. Right. And the argument from the kind of like establishment media types and think tank types about why we don't do this is that it's a very dangerous road to go down. You start not just trying to defeat your opponent at the ballot box, but like imprison them, put them in a cage for life. And it kind of brings this desire for vindictiveness that is just in human nature. And I kind of watched this a lot in Brazil, where the prior president, Lula da Silva, was in prison for 18 months. The one after him, Jair Bolsonaro, is now imprisoned. And it makes both sides feel like the other side really wants to not just defeat them, but murder them. And of course, this went back to 2016. It wasn't just after January 6th, when the Democrat strategy was to try and prove that Trump criminally colluded with Robert Mueller, and they were having fantasies about frog marching him out of the White House, putting his kids in prison. And then it got a lot more serious when he was actually indicted and, in the case of Manhattan, convicted, and probably on the road to prison for life. And I think that made changes in Trump in two different ways. One is it fortified his desire for vengeance against the people he perceived were doing that to him. Whereas before, he didn't have a problem with Hillary Clinton. He would say bad things about her, but they were all part of the same social class. This made him feel like these were really evil people. And then the other thing I think it made him feel was that he had to do anything in 2024 to win, because losing meant going to prison for life. And I think he just sold everything there was to sell to Elon Musk, to Mary Middleton, made all kinds of promises that he now feels duty bound to keep and is keeping. that were completely contrary to whatever small ideological instincts that he previously had. So it made him desperate on top of that.
Yeah. And then the continuation of this, I would assume, is that if the Democrats win in 28, they're going to be under tremendous pressure to prosecute a lot of people who are in power right now. And then you just go further and further down that spiral. I feel like the only way you sort of reverse that spiral and escape this sort of authoritarian sort of death loop is for one side to just say that the principles of civil libertarianism have to come first. And it doesn't seem to me like either of these two warring gangs are willing to do that, are willing to lay down their arms. It just seems like we're going to get more persecution when power changes hands again, which just makes the stakes even more existential on the other side. And then when they take power back, it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah, you know, the big argument that I think a lot of people like myself make, who view the world primarily through a civil libertarian one, at least in terms of these issues, and try to avoid the partisan one. I remember, again, in my naivete, I used to try and say to conservatives, like reason with them, look, I know you think the power to imprison people for life with no charges or to kidnap people off the streets is probably being benignly exercised because in the hands of benevolent leaders like George Bush and Dick Cheney, probably not being abused, probably only for the best of ends. But imagine that if you endorse this system that ends up in the hands of Hillary Clinton, you know, imagine what she's going to do to you. And I've seen over the years that the attitude becomes, they're going to do that to us, whether we do it or not. They've already shown that they want to destroy us and put us in prison. And so we're not going to have one hand tied behind our back. And down that road lies, you know, just pure power politics, no constraints in law, ethics, civil liberties. And I think we're rapidly heading down that road if we're not already well down the way.
Yeah. And there's another piece of this. So, you know, as someone who, you know, has made a lot of friends, you know, on the right in recent years, last time you came on the show, you were talking about the problem of audience capture and how you've avoided that because of your critiques of the Democratic Party. You started getting accepted into more right of center circles. Janine Eunice talks about the exact same thing when she started dissenting against the COVID policies by the liberal administration. She was kind of welcomed in by many on the right. And, you know,
she led the litigation. She led the litigation to sue the Biden administration for First Amendment violations for pressuring big tech companies to censor. So, yeah, she did a lot during the Biden years that made her popular with conservatives.
Yes. And I feel like, you know, I kind of got not sucked into that space, but I think a lot of us in the sort of vaguely speaking, sort of left libertarian space, took a lot of right-wing figures, at least seriously and in good faith, when they started gesturing to us that they were anti-war and that they were supportive of free speech. I feel, quite frankly, kind of taken advantage of by a lot of these right-wing figures. I feel like they very cynically saw that the Democratic establishment was kicking a lot of us out of the coalition. And so they made these big gestures about how, hey, we don't agree with you on everything, but we're anti-war and we're pro-free speech. And I think a lot of them gave a lot of us, I won't speak for you, but I think I certainly gave them the benefit of the doubt in a lot of cases. And I kind of feel like an asshole. I kind of feel like I was sort of used and taken advantage of in that way. Do you feel the same way? Do you feel like we kind of were basically bullshitted into taking a lot of these people seriously now that in Trump's second term, they've been masked off from the outset? I mean, they're talking about Mahmoud Khalil deserves to be, you know, deported to Syria. I mean, they have just proven very quickly that they have no commitment whatsoever to these things that they kind of used to get us to at least start giving them our ear.
Yeah, and bombing everyone they can find. And
yeah, that too.
You know, just on and on. You know, I totally empathize with your reaction, and it's extremely relatable. I understand it perfectly. I guess what prevents me from feeling betrayed, like just that kind of emotional reaction, is that I feel like that's exactly what I went through in the 2008 election. I mean, I wasn't, you know, walking around like Ezra Klein writing odes to how Obama's rhetoric and his presence was like Jesus. But I listened to those speeches he gave in the Senate, you know, which was my main focus, and I really paid attention to that stuff. I remember one time he gave a speech in the Senate about how it's so urgent to have at least one ability to get into court if you're a U.S. prisoner with no charges, habeas corpus, which the Republicans are denying. And he gave this speech like, I'm a young father. Imagine if the police showed up at your house and took your son and put him into prison and didn't even have to prove his guilt in court. And all you wanted was one sheet. So I listened to these kind of things. I was like, no, unless this is like the biggest snake oil salesman ever, I believe that not just Obama, but the Democrats, broadly speaking, not just believe in it, but were really passionate about it and committed to doing everything they could to undermine it. And then when I saw that they just didn't, when I saw that once it wasn't in their interest, when the power was in their hands, I think it made me conclude, and again, I think it was probably a little bit of naivete to begin with, that's generally how human struggles for power work. We might try and be principled. Some of us recite that we are. But at the end of the day, we want power. We want the ability to force others to submit to our will. And, I don't want to oversimplify. I do think there are people who were in MAGA and in the Trump campaign who genuinely wish those policies were being implemented. And at least speaking solely for myself, it wasn't that I ever thought, oh, they're really serious. They're really going to do this. I just personally feel like if you're actually someone who believes in the things that you're saying, like you wake up and you say, I think censorship is an evil. I think constant U.S. endless wars are destructive to the world and to the American citizenry. Automatically, by definition, if you're an ethical person, you look for ways not just to let the world know that you're against those things, but to do what you can to change it. And that means looking for allies, usually allies in unsuspecting places. And I don't think, at least for me, again, if you're being realistic, you go there thinking, oh, these people are all serious. They're never going to deviate from this, even if their own president gets into office. But you have to try. You have to try and form those coalitions and to some extent take people out their world without being, incredibly naive. And so that was at least my perspective. And just by the way, I do think we shouldn't oversimplify. I mean, you see a lot of young conservatives really turning against our relationship with Israel, or with the interventions in the Middle East, or with, corporate policies that only help the rich. There's not a lot of that sentiment among young conservatives. Like it's the Reagan era. So I think there's a lot there that is genuine. It just doesn't translate to the highest levels of the party or the DC class.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's totally true. And I think it's also reflected in Trump's poll numbers that a lot of the more serious and principled conservatives are now telling pollsters, no, they don't approve of the job he's doing anymore. Like, I think, as these offenses pile up and just get more and more outrageous, I think you're left with the less and less sort of serious, sort of just more dug in, sort of partisan actors who will actually tell a pollster, yeah, I agree. I support what the job that Donald Trump is doing, which brings us, of course, to one of the just most outrageous examples of what we're talking about here, which is the killing of Alex Preddy and Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh, tweets out this in response to this: an armed leftist went out with a gun to deliberately interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operations. And I'm seeing some conservatives on this site claim that it might be ICE's fault that the guy is now dead. Insane. Some of you people will never effing learn. So then Ryan Grimm quote tweets him, Walsh literally cannot conceive of having an ethical principle that applies to every American, including people he disagrees with politically. Unfathomable to him. To which then you reply, Matt Walsh and these other right-wing empty men who think they're avatars of uber masculinity particularly hate Alex Preddy because he exemplified the virtues they love to extol, but are too cowardly to actually embody. They cosplay as trad men by dressing up in campy plaid shirts and sitting in podcast studios with a log cabin aesthetic. I wore my plaid shirt just for this because I knew we were going to talk about this. I just want to say,
but there's no log cabin stuff there, so there's you're not a real man.
No, in fact, there's a fake plant here.
It's very soy.
Looks like it's growing out of my head, so I'll move it. Yeah, no, I grow beards and wear campy plaid shirts because I'm lazy. That's what it is. It's not to appear more masculine. It's just because I don't like combing my hair, and I don't like having to keep cotton shirts from wrinkling. If a plaid shirt wrinkles, it doesn't really matter. That's the great thing about wearing plaid shirts. But that's not why Matt Walsh wears them. Alex Preddy went to the street to fight for causes he believed in, protected and helped others in both how he protested. He was helping 2 women when ICE grabbed him, and his work as an ICU nurse. He lived the values they pretend defines them, all while they lack the courage to ever do or risk anything. He is a reminder to them of what they're not, a mirror showing their own fragility. That's why they feel vicariously strong watching ICE agents shoot him in the back and kill him. Yeah, I thought that was absolutely spot on. We've said on this show for a long time, what's left of this movement are basically weak men who like to live vicariously through who they perceive to be strong men. And I think a lot of these men were probably bullied as young people, and so they experience strength. Their idea of a strong man is the guy who does the bullying. Perfect example of that. I don't know if you saw this, but here's Tim Pool just like putting it so on the nose. You almost think this is an AI parody, but it's not.
When these people come out and go, Tim's a bootlicker for defending us, I'm like, no, you misunderstand. It's my boots. It's mine. I voted for them. I'm wearing the boot. I'm stomping on the ground. I ain't licking anybody. I'm clapping for these people that I said, please go out and enforce the law. And anybody else who's cheering for it, who voted for it too, we're all wearing the boots. You're the one crying. You're the one saying, you're coming.
I mean, is that not just a cartoonish example of exactly what you're talking about?
Totally. I mean, Tim does not wear any boots. He has pom-poms, and he gets into his cheerleader mode on the sideline, and he cheers for the people who do actually have boots. And, it's funny. All of this goes back for me a long way. And I have to say, maybe some of this is personal. I remember very well, in the 1980s. And I guess we're just going to age myself constantly on this discussion, despite my best attempts to avoid it. But, the 1980s for me was when I came of age, like as a teenager, realizing I was gay. And it was a very interesting time from the gay perspective, because it used to be, it was never discussed. And in the 80s, for the first time, it was discussed, but it was discussed in like the most vitriolic, terms of disgust and contempt. It was the age of AIDS, which was connected to homosexuality. And there emerged all these social media stars who loved to do nothing but sit in judgment of and police the private sex lives of other adults. That's what this whole movement was about. And I'm not going to say all of them, but a huge number, like a disproportionately high number, ended up being exposed for having all kinds of sex scandals that destroyed them, at least as bad as, and in a lot of cases far worse than, the behavior that they got very rich condemning. And so whenever I look at somebody who in their public life is really desperately trying to convince others that they're an avatar of certain values, that experience leads me to believe that there's a good likelihood that part of that desperation that they have to get others to see them that way is because they actually don't see themselves that way. In fact, they know they're not that way internally, and it's kind of compensatory. And I think the first time and it relates very much to what we were just talking about, the very first time I kind of focused on this was back in the War on Terror days. Before I started writing, I was reading a lot of bloggers who were giving very different perspectives than the media. It was a time when there were far fewer media choices. And I remember reading an essay once, I think it was by the liberal blogger Digby, and she talked about how this kind of right-wing aesthetic on the right, American conservatism, was very important. Like they venerated like John Wayne, even though he never went to the military. And in reality, like the hippie movement of the 1960s was this very, aggressively masculine movement. They like stood down the government. Some of them got shot. They entered government buildings. I mean, like those radicals were, you can say whatever you want about them, but they had this kind of courage of putting things on the line for the cause they believed in. And then you had a lot of people who avoided Vietnam, who were too scared to go and fight in Vietnam. And those kind of became like the neocons of the Bush-Cheney era. And I remember Jonah Goldberg, one of the kind of example of that, he wrote an essay once saying, look, does it really matter if Saddam Hussein has nuclear weapons? The important thing is that every 10 years or so, the United States needs to just pick a crappy country and throw it against the wall to prove that we can. And I remember thinking, you're not throwing any. It's kind of like Tim Pool with his boots.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that in order to support a war, you have to go and haven't fought in one first or prove physical courage in some way. What I'm talking about are the kinds of people who really seem to derive like self-esteem or this vicarious sense of courage not from doing things themselves or putting their own lives on the line, but cheering for other people who do. And I just do find it notable that these left-wing protesters in Minnesota, though, despised by the American right, in a lot of ways are representing the virtues that they claim so much to believe in, but that they themselves never really find the ability or the internal strength to express.
Yeah, it's funny. Russell talks a lot about, especially during the Biden era, during what, some call peak woke, about how a lot of liberal political discourse is risk-free virtue signaling, right? It's sort of lifestyle brand disguised as politics, right? It's people signaling to each other that they adopt, certain sort of cultural mores, and that signals to the rest of them that they're in the group. And one of the other ironies of this era is that this sort of movement that emerged as a backlash to that is engaging in so much of the same thing. I mean, all this like obsession with eating red meat and drinking whole milk. And I'm not anti-whole milk. We give our kids whole milk. But you need to put Donald Trump in like 1950s Leave It to Beaver cartoon styles and, tweet that out. It's a signal. It's lifestyle branding masquerading as a political project. And yeah, to me, it feels like when what you're trying to project out is a function of what you are compensating for. I mean, you are a podcaster now, but you're also a journalist. You've spent many years as a journalist, and you have been put in harm's way. I mean, you've been persecuted or by your own government. You got those Edward Snowden leaks. There is a difference. As much as I like what I do, I would never put myself in the same category as someone who sits here and talks shit into a microphone as someone like you who actually goes out and takes risks and gets stories. That's another pattern. Like, we don't see Matt Walsh really doing much of that. We don't see Tim Pool really doing any of that. We don't see many of these people injecting themselves into the issues in the way that a lot of journalists do.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of what I can't stand either is, they have this very performative, almost like I said, campy kind of image of what masculinity is.
Right.
Almost like, the Village People. I mean, they were intended to be a campy expression of uber masculinity, like with the professions that they chose, the way they dressed. To me, this is what a lot of people on the American right are, who are obsessed with these like traditional gender roles. And it would bother me a lot less if these were actually like frontiersmen going out like into the wilderness and feeding themselves for weeks or whatever.
Oh, did we lose them? Uh-oh. Did we lose Glenn? Let me see. Glenn, if you can hear me, you might want to sign out and sign back in. Let me see. Uh-oh, got an internet issue there. Let me see what we could do about that. Yeah, it looks like Glenn's internet went out. All right, let's see if he can sign back in. Oops, there we go. Okay, device is not connected. All right, he will hopefully be signing back in. Let's see, is he back? There, you're back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm just, I don't know why everything disconnected in terms of preferences. As long as I'm here. I think the camera angle is a little weird. Maybe I'll figure that out some other point. Probably not. But you can see me.
You look, yeah, you look like me now. We're in the same. We're at the same angle now.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, what I was saying is like, I don't know. I'm sure you saw like Jeff Bezos is basically going to lay off a huge portion of the foreign reporting desk at the Washington Post. And although I'm not a big fan of corporate media, to put that mildly, I know some of the people who do that work, and they go to the most dangerous places, the most unstable places, the places where there's the highest incident of journalists being killed, and they make a lot of people angry with their reporting. And it takes a lot of physical courage to do that. But if you ask, the kind of Matt Walshes of the world, these people obsessed with this like hyper masculinity, they'll talk about those people as these like loser leftists who contribute nothing of value to society. And yet, in my own work, obviously, I did the Snowden reporting. I did work in Brazil that almost got me imprisoned. And I don't think it's important to go around boasting about those things. I mean, you do them out of principle, but I think that's the point, is like the people who actually do things that they feel like exhibit these kinds of values don't have this insecure need to run around saying, look at me over here, I'm the epitome of this virtue, and those people over there aren't. And I think so much of this culture war slop isn't about confronting powerful factions. Like, what people in power does Matt Walsh ever make angry? They're fine if we're at each other's throats over like trans issues or abortion. Not saying those are unimportant, but that's not that's not the kind of work that creates danger, that requires courage. And I think there's a lot in our discourse, even with these recent wars, you know, in Venezuela and Iran. When I opposed them, I heard a lot of people saying to me, oh, you're a coward. And I was like, it takes no courage to send other people off to go bomb and put their lives at risk. That doesn't make you courageous. I think that's become part of our war propaganda, the way we think about ourselves. Like, yeah, Tim Pool in his boots that he doesn't actually wear. And I think that is a significant issue.
Yes, for sure. All right. So following some of the mechanics of the just outright lies told by those in Trump's orbit about the Alex Preddy shooting, this is a scoop today. Blame game erupts over Trump team's false claim Alex Preddy sought massacre. So Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is under fire for issuing misleading and incendiary information that claimed immigration agents killed an armed Minnesota protester Saturday because he wanted to massacre them. That language has now become a source of controversy in the Trump administration. White House officials are blaming Customs and Border Patrol for furnishing inaccurate information, while others are targeting Stephen Miller, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff and top Trump advisor. 6 sources with knowledge of the situation told Axios. So here's a highlighted quote from Noem. Everything I've done at the direction of the president and Stephen, Noem told the person who relayed her remarks to Axios. And Stephen Miller, then in the highlighted section down below, says any early comments made were based on information sent to the White House through CBP, Miller told Axios in response to an earlier version of this story in which others blamed him for the massacre statement. You did a whole segment on your show about just how shamelessly all these people have lied about these ICE shootings, in particular this second one. And this seems to be the only episode, at least in recent memory, and you can correct me if I'm missing something, that any of these people have been forced to at least try and walk back any of their lies. It feels like this was the bullshit story that just couldn't be sold. Why do you think that is? Because these people have been just telling pretty outrageous lies for quite a long time, but this seems to be the one that even they seem to now realize was just not going to fly.
Yeah, in general, even though Americans, by every metric, do support deportation of people who enter the country legally, or even what you might call mass deportation, it doesn't mean that either they've thought through all the steps by the state that would actually be required to do that, or once they see it are comfortable with it. And like in general, I don't think Americans want to see armed agents of the state gunning down people who are American citizens in their communities for the crime of political protesting. I also think it has to do, and I don't want to overstate it, but I also don't want to ignore it. You know, I could see all of right-wing discourse kind of get deflated when it turned out in that first instance where the ICE agent pumped bullets into the head of the driver, that she wasn't like Somali or Guatemalan, but she was like this white lady with kids from, you know, looking like anyone in Minneapolis. And I think that's what happened with Alex Preddy too. I mean, it's hard to find the perfect victim, but this is an ICU nurse. Like, I think people valorize that work almost more than anything. I know I do, who work for the VA with no criminal record. And so you don't get to feed Americans that kind of instinctive thing, like, well, these were kind of bad people who probably deserved it. But I think what you put your finger on at the start is probably the most important thing, which is what Stephen Miller said there is just adds insult to injury, because everybody who watched even one version of that video when it first emerged in the morning, let alone multiple ones, which emerged very quickly, knew right away that this was not somebody who went there with the intention of massacring as many law enforcement officials as he wanted, or was it domestic terrorist? And look at how they're all like little rats blame shifting because they know it's a problem. Chrissy Nome saying, "Oh, what I said was scripted by Stephen Miller."
Yeah.
And he's
He
saying,
wrote it.
"Oh, yeah, the Customs and Border people told me." Once you start seeing them point to each other as the reason they said what they said, you know they have a real problem. And I do think that problem is it feels out of control. It feels violent and like a powder keg. And I think most Americans, the polls show this, blame Trump. People just don't want to see this in the United States.
Yeah. And it once again, it is out of their control, because it seems like if you're playing the long game, and it seems like this administration is playing the long game, when you add together, the tripling of the ICE budget in the one beautiful bill, with the Palantir contracts, they really seem kind of intent on the long-term project of building out a police state enforced by nationalized, sort of deputized troops. You'd think someone in that circle would be prudent enough to know that, okay, we can't floor the pedal to the metal on every inch of road, because that invites a certain backlash. You would think that if they're so intent on doing what it seems to me they're quite intent on doing, they would have known from the outset, you know what, this is bad. We got to throw these half a dozen CBP agents under the bus, because if we double down on this and call the guy a domestic terrorist, it's going to invite the kind of backlash that's going to set our overall project back. For whatever interval of time people remain upset about this, which I hope is forever, quite frankly. But nobody in there seems to be prudent enough to do that. They all just seem so bullheaded that it's just, no matter what the story is, anyone in our way is a terrorist, fuck them, move on. That seems to be their reflexive attitude towards every one of these issues that come up.
Yeah, I mean, I do think in a lot of ways, and this is true for so much of Trump, this isn't like some radical deviation from how our government functions, but more just a more brazen extension of it. It's one of the things that always drove me crazy. The U.S. would kill, 22 people in a wedding party in Yemen by drone, and they would have no idea who died, no idea who was even there. And then Reuters would say the U.S. government kills 22 Al-Qaeda members / officials say. So, branding anyone who you kill as a terrorist, obviously is an Israeli practice, but it's one the United States is used to. And there's a lot of that going on here. But I think, again, when you shift these tactics to the United States, and you're talking about the relationship now between the American state and its citizens, that I think is when it becomes a lot more disturbing. And you're right. And I think this is one of the things that Trump has always done better than anybody, or at least as well as anybody in his life. He has that pathological liar's ability to just look at you and say something completely false. Right. And there's not even when I was a lawyer, I would cross-examine people or depose them. And if someone was lying, they would always usually have a towel, because it's not something they normally do. Trump's been doing it his whole life. And he set the standard that, no, when you lie and you get caught, you never admit it. You never apologize for it. You insist the person who caught you is the one who's actually lying. And I think he set that ethos. The problem here for them is that their description of what happened, especially at the beginning, was so transparently and glaringly different than what we all could watch in the video, that I just think people were alarmed by that level of insultingly brazen lying. We all know our government's lie. It's kind of best if it's kept hidden. Right. But when we ourselves get to see what they saw, and then compare it to what they're saying that's just absolutely fake and invented and false, I think that's when the problem for the state starts to emerge.
Absolutely. And to your point in there, Chris Hedges just put out an article talking about the imperial boomerang. That feels like so much of what we're witnessing. And this is part of why, obviously, what's happening, in Gaza is just abhorrent on every level, irrespective of what it says about what is coming to us. But you've seen some people online talk about, well, if Kamala had won, this ICE stuff wouldn't be happening. And I want to tell them, you're probably right about that, which is why it's a real shame that she endorsed a genocide, because if she hadn't, maybe we could have voted for her. As terrible as what this administration is doing to us, what Israel did to the Palestinians under the Democrats' watch and with the Democrats' help was a million times worse. And if we're actually like politically minded and principled, we have to accept that, as tough as this is now for us, our lives are not any more important than the lives of the people who have been massacred by Israel for the last 2.5 years now at an industrial scale. And, this is something, you started, just to take it back to the beginning of the conversation, you started your career, writing about the sort of post 9/11 sort of military and surveillance infrastructure. And it seems like, it's a lot easier to ignore it when it's happening to people overseas, to the point where even now you have people saying, well, if only the Democrats had won, this wouldn't have been happening. Well, look what would have been happening. What they are doing to the Palestinians is what they are eventually going to do to us unless we turn this around.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons that a lot of people who are older and came up in the Vietnam generation, like Trump, learned is that if you're involving yourself in foreign wars and you're sending Americans to fight them who are coming home in large numbers in body bags and coffins, that's when Americans get really angry and upset and will take to the streets. But as long as it's kind of clinical, as long as they don't have to see it, as long as the only people going are the people who volunteered to do it, and the war is fought in a way to maximize damage on the population you're targeting in order to minimize the number of troops who are actually dying, they may be opposed to it, but they won't really be impassioned enough to want to bring down a government or to care enough to do it. And I think even now you see with Trump's, very excessive and dangerous military adventures in places like Venezuela and Iran, he seems very eager to make sure that it is contained because of that sentiment that you just described, that as long as it's not happening to us, we don't seem to care as much, which might be a very human element to this whole thing. And that, I think, is the point is, again, if this were Somalian immigrants who seemed very kind of, distant from and alien to the average American culture, or even people who are easily marginalized, Black people in underprivileged communities, or Latinos, or whomever, maybe the reaction wouldn't quite be as potent, which is why I said you could see the conservative disappointment when they saw the pictures of the two victims by ICE, but also then the background about them, that it just created a lot more instinctive empathy and a lot more willingness to resist the idea that they were actually doing something, not just wrong, but wrong enough to justify their killing. And on some level, like the fact that there is that kind of empathy, even if it's imperfect and selected, I think is a good thing. But on your point about, this counterfactual combo, because it does drive me crazy. First of all, there's always this underlying, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard from people who, if they think you didn't vote for Kamala or didn't campaign enough for her, I heard this all the time with Hillary, then it means you're responsible for every single thing that Trump did. You're responsible for the ICE killings. But when they go vote for Democrats, they don't hold themselves to that same standard. Right. They don't think they are personally responsible for the financing and arming of the greatest crime of the 21st century, which is the genocide in Israel. They could say, oh, no, I voted for him, but I'm against that.
Right.
And I also think these counterfactuals are very difficult. Like, it was always like, would Al Gore have invaded Iraq? Maybe not. Probably not. But that was a official regime change position of the Clinton administration. And I think in the case of Kamala, as imperfect as the ceasefire in Gaza is, Trump did engineer 2 of them, whereas Biden and Harris never tried, even according to the Israelis, to get a real ceasefire going. Who knows what might happen in Ukraine if we were more aggressive with there and confronting the Russians. Very easy when you're out of office and when you lose an election to say, look at all the bad things that you caused by not voting for our candidate. We would have had a nirvana. It's very easy to say that when that person's not president.
Sure thing. All right, I got a couple more questions for you. I have to ask you about Bari Weiss because there's some news on this front here. Leaked audio. Bari Weiss tells staff CBS News is toast if it can't evolve beyond broadcast news. In a town hall on Tuesday, Bari Weiss shared her vision for CBS News and some tough truth with her staff. The CBS News editor-in-chief, handpicked by Paramount Skydance CEO David Ellison, told employees that the company must evolve beyond broadcast TV and earn audience trust. Our strategy until now has been to cling to the audience that remains on broadcast television. I'm here to tell you that if we stick to that strategy, we're toast, Weiss said on the all-hands call, according to a recording obtained by Business Insider. Weiss added that CBS News is still in a linear mentality, and we need to shift to a streaming mentality immediately. The honest truth is, right now, we are not producing a product that enough people want, Weiss said. She added that the staff can't entirely blame factors like demographics or technology or ADHD or fractured attention spans or news avoidance for audience declines. The CBS News top editor also announced she's adding many more contributors, including writers and podcasters, to the news network. After the call, CBS News announced 19 new contributors, including former Atlantic writer Derek Thompson, former General H.R. McMaster, and happiness expert Arthur Brooks. In her first memo to CBS News staffers, Weiss shared her 10 core tenets, including a pledge to prioritize journalism that is fair, fearless, and factual. I don't want to live in an America where there's no trust in our great institutions, Weiss said on the Tuesday call. Weiss later added that trust in mainstream news organizations and the legacy press is at historic lows, and it's not hard to understand why. So you can read her full remarks for the audience if you're interested. Max Tanny has it tweeted out. We're not going to do that. That seems awfully tedious, but here are just a page of them there. You can go check that out. But one of the things I found interesting is, ironically here, Benjamin Armbruster says, it's odd that Barry Weiss keeps telling CBS News journalists that Americans don't trust us, when in fact Americans very much trust CBS News. Well, they did before Weiss took over. If you look at a ranking of net positive or negative trust factors, CBS ranked decently high there. Of course, the Weather Channel is the highest at plus 49. A lot of people trust the Weather Channel, which is, that's not really fair. I can't count that since Jews control both the media and the weather. So that's kind of a double dip on the Weather Channel. But in terms of everything else, yeah, they seem right at the top. And you know, I think I could speak for both of us when I say neither of us are really defenders of the reputation of mainstream media. But when you look at what has happened to CBS News in the few weeks that Barry Weiss has been at the helm, it is, I think, completely delusional to think that she has increased trust in that network. Now, you've talked and written about Barry Weiss a great deal. What have you seen happen to CBS News? Is this going to hell faster than you thought? Because I didn't expect it to go to hell this quickly.
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say to my friends at the ADL that the comment about ownership of the weather and the media and control of it by Jews was not mine, but the host of this program.
Yeah, no.
And I had no like nodding indications or anything else like that might get me included in some list on which I'm already on like multiple times. I just don't need another one. But in any event, here's the thing. And just kind of this is a little bit ancillary to what you asked, but I also think it's important. Like if you look at this list of 19 new contributors that she's obviously so proud of having added, they're all like basically Barry associates. You know, I used to write a lot about the so-called new atheists, like at the time of like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris being at the peak of influence. And one of the big frauds, the big shticks that Sam Harris would always do is he would make a big deal about going around and talking to all these different people. Like, hey, look, I'm talking to Bill Maher, and now I'm talking to, you know, Ted Cruz, and now I'm talking to Dave Rubin, who's a gay liberal. But in fact, they agreed on everything Sam Harris actually cared about, which was like the evils of Islam and the reverence that they shared for Israel. And it was like this very artificial diversity that they were compiling while praising themselves for it. That's all Barry is doing. And I think it goes to the broader point, which is, I mean, she's not wrong. And I kind of choke on these words, but in her critique of the media, it absolutely is true that networks like CBS News have lost an immense amount of influence over the past even 2 decades. And you can't blame it all on things like the internet or technology, some of which are factors. But polls overwhelmingly do show that Americans believe that the corporate media largely and overwhelmingly acts for political motives, will manipulate the truth in order to advance a political agenda. Even if CBS News is higher up on the list, and I think that's a lot because of Walter Cronkite and like CBS and 60 Minutes, which kind of created this valuable brand that CBS has. I think a lot of that is just kind of like residual. And my guess is it's probably not very high relative to what it used to be. And so she's not wrong. I do think a problem that journalists have who work in these institutions is they complain a lot about the fact that they've lost audience and trust and faith, but they never look in the mirror and ask what they've done to contribute to it. And it just is true that if you're in these organizations, you can't just keep doing things as you've been doing because it hasn't been working from any metric. So as far as that is concerned, she's right. But it's a very generalized and vague observation that anybody can make. The problem is, and this is what I think is so important and so often missed with this story, is that Larry Ellison did not buy Paramount and CBS News with the goal of then putting Barry Weiss in charge because he thought she'd be the best for maximizing the ratings and profit of CBS News. Nobody minimally sentient would think Barry Weiss is the best. She's never worked in television news at all, let alone run a major news organization. And the ideas that she have are so superficial and an inch deep. She's there because she serves as this kind of ideological representation for very wealthy older people and for hardcore Zionist Jews to get to hear some young pseudo hip lesbian liberal woman tell them that when their kids come home from college and call them Zionist and racist, that they're actually not in the right. The parents are in the right. And that's kind of why that's the role she plays. And I think the reason why the Ellisons are buying up so many media outlets, not just CBS News and Paramount, but also now they're heading the consortium that controls TikTok. They're trying to buy Warner Brothers, is because Larry Ellison is the largest ever private donor to Friends of the IDF. His only political cause he cares about is Israel. And he put Barry Weiss in that position because her job there is to make sure that CBS News becomes an institution that only allows an advancement of Israel's agenda. Larry Ellison is the richest person on the planet. We're talking about $280 billion of wealth that can't even be imagined. He's more than happy to let CBS News be a loss leader if it is one more thing that he takes out of the culture like TikTok or CNN that contributes to the unraveling of American support for Israel. So I think it's important to remember also not only that Barry Weiss is so inept and incompetent, nobody has less of a chance to save CBS than she does, but also remember what her real job is, which I don't really think has anything to do with ratings of CBS News, which everybody understands is a dying institution.
Well, yeah, I mean, she seems to be like a one-to-one sort of mirror image of the very sort of problems that she sort of spreads throughout media circles. Like, she seems to believe all of the press about herself. Like, you can see, I read through a lot of these. We're not going to get really tedious and do all this, but thanks for being here. I need to start by acknowledging there's been a lot of noise, blah, blah, blah. The only thing I can promise is that it's going to be one hell of a fight, and I don't just think we can win that fight. I know we can. Who the fuck are you? I mean, there's got to be people who are sitting there watching her thinking, how do you feel confident in lecturing us how to do our jobs? All the problems of the mainstream media, yes, being what they are, there's a basic level of competence that went into, for example, that 60 Minutes story about CCOT, which she spiked, I think, because the administration freaked out about it. There's got to be people who put that together who are now listening to these lectures by this woman who was clearly handpicked by one of the most influential Zionists in the world to be a mouthpiece for Zionist propaganda. They now have to sit here and absorb this pep talk from this know-nothing hack who clearly got the job for reasons I don't even think she realizes. I think she believes all the press about herself.
Oh, yeah.
That she is this whiz kid.
I mean, I think part of the resentment toward her, removing her from the picture for the moment, is kind of a standard generational conflict. Older workers at a corporation don't appreciate when they have much younger bosses. They always think there's something kind of unfair about it. I think when you bring in a new generation of leaders, people who are there for a lot longer, think, no, what we do is the right thing, and they don't understand it, and they're threat. These kind of tensions are normal. The problem is that at least usually when these kind of people are brought in who are younger, who represent the next generation, they at least have actual experience and accomplishments in the area that they're expected to manage, whereas Barry Weiss has none. But the bigger problem with her is exactly the one that you just said. Honestly, I would not be able to go 3 days without having an actual aneurysm. imagine having to endure lectures from Barry Weiss on the problem with journalism being that it is agenda driven. And this is a woman who spent all of her college years trying to get Arab professors fired for criticizing Israel and ruin the lives of archaeologists who tried to prove archaeologically that Palestinians were. This is a woman who was devoted to the destruction of anybody who had different views and then rebranded as a free speech advocate. She's the least principled and most craven and politicized person you can think of, which is, as you say, why she got the job. And then she comes in and starts giving these sanctimonious lectures on the need for journalism to be detached from political values. It's so sickening. I really, I don't like the people at CBS News, but I genuinely feel sorry for them.
All right. We got one more question for you. Thanks so much for making time. Really great to talk to you again. I have to talk to you about Upscrolled a little bit because you just did a whole piece about the censorship at TikTok driving so many people away. And you just tweeted out this morning that you are on Upscrolled, at least in some capacity. TikTok users are fleeing from TikTok's crackdown on political dissent regarding Israel and the U.S., but people now smell the stench of online censorship. A new TikTok-like app devoted to free speech on these issues, Upscrolled, is rapidly flourishing. So there's a new profile picture. So Greenwald updates. Everybody go follow Glenn on Upscrolled. We got like 1,000 followers overnight. We plugged it on our last show. It really is fast growing. I mean, it really has taken off. But you raise an interesting point here, which I think is worth talking about. As for Upscrolled, I understand and share the excitement. There are far too few social media apps genuinely devoted to free speech, but it's in Australia. Jack has long warned that any centralized tech company will be vulnerable to state attacks to censor. We'll see. Who's Jack? Is that Jack Dorsey? Is that the
Jack
former
Dorsey? Yeah, Jack
Twitter?
Dorsey.
Okay. Tell us about your thoughts on the sort of TikTok exodus and the potential and, obviously potential pitfalls for an Australia-bound app, given the state censorship there.
Yeah. So, a couple of things. One is, of course, just as somebody who's devoted myself for so long to this cause, when I see large numbers of people being very aware of the dangers of platform censorship and not just aware of it, but willing to take action to leave a platform they really like and have been using for a long time out of protest to not want to support an app that censors criticism of Israel, it makes me happy. It's a cause for optimism. I really like seeing that. I think it's important that people feel that way and are moved by it. And at first, when I saw people talking about this, and I wanted to wait some time just to understand it better, to do some research into it. I was very happy for all these people that there now is this place founded by a Palestinian American who encourages free speech about Israel. There's two problems with it. One is like Jack Dorsey, when he was at Twitter, was often under fire for censorship. And a lot of these guys like Jack Dorsey, who grew out of that first generation of Silicon Valley, didn't want to create social media to censor. They're like from this libertarian wing, like it was all in the 90s, a free internet, government, keep your hands off the internet. And what he discovered was when you get big enough, you then come under the power of the state. The state can screw you in all kinds of ways. Major corporations can screw you. The media can manipulate those corporations to punish you if you don't censor. And he became convinced that no matter how genuine and devoted people are who start a social media company in the name of free speech, that as long as there's a centralized group of managers that you cannot just identify, but attack and harm or even prosecute, they'll eventually have to capitulate to state demands for regulated content moderation, which of course means censorship. And he thinks that's why he thinks only blockchain and this kind of individualized instances, which are a little bit technically difficult, but basically there's no centralized management team like there was at Twitter that you can go to if you're the government of the New York Times and say, why are you allowing this speech? And I've seen this, at places like Rumble, which were very devoted to free speech, but ended up refusing government orders to censor. They're completely banned from Brazil. They're banned from France. Elon Musk made the opposite choice. He says, if you kick me out of a country, I will then obey all censorship orders. And Australia in particular, and there's reasons why, has a huge Zionist movement influencing it. They've long been very aggressive about whatever they consider hate speech, which is like the liberal conception. But they've been particularly focused since October 7th on criticism of Israel. And then after that Bondi Beach shooting, where those two guys went in and gunned down Jewish people at a Hanukkah celebration, the Israeli government cracked down and demanded that they enact very extreme hate speech laws that basically criminalize and outlaw criticism of Israel. And they have. And this company now will presumably be under enforcement of those laws since they're Australia-based. And I saw today some high-up official basically saying, look, we believe in free speech, but not untrammeled. We won't allow disinformation on our site or hate speech. And that, once you open those doors, that's the door that Facebook opened and Google opened and Twitter opened. Down that road lies exactly the kinds of censorship that they're claiming they will avoid. So I hope it works, but it's more of a systemic problem, I think, that they're facing.
Yeah, though, I mean, Michael Schellenberger has talked a lot about this, that part of the way these companies are being censored is because these are sort of international companies. If there's one country that imposes, draconian rules about censorship or content moderation, since the ethos of tech, Zuckerberg branded it move fast, break things. Really, the ethos of tech is these people just don't like to work much at all. Like they like to get rich in their gym shorts, working from their Miami condos. Like they'll just the goal, I think, is to strong arm these companies into just setting blanket policies across the board in order not to run afoul of the most censorious jurisdictions in which they operate. So in other words, in the case of Australia, the idea is even if the company moves away, if there are certain places that prevent you from doing business there, you'll sort of accommodate the entire business model in order to stay in line with those rules. Now, one company that has famously not done this is the site that you broadcast to. And I did want to mention Rumble here because Rumble is introducing their shorts. And I know because we are on Rumble too, and we have a point of contact there who's told us about the Shorts program coming out, which is a TikTok-like video platform where you'll be able to make this show sort of short, vertically clipped videos. So breaking after the mass exodus from TikTok to Upscrolled, Rumble CEO Chris Pavlovsky spoke out and also promised freedom of speech forever on his platform. Delete TikTok, download Rumble, where free speech is forever. Shorts arrive next week, February 4th. Be first. Now, just so everybody understands, I'm not trying to be competitive and say you should, use one instead of the other. Obviously, sorry, my baby is screaming. They're on their way out the door. It's important to be diversified on social media to avoid censorship or to circumvent censorship. But, a lot of people have mentioned how, Peter Thiel is an investor in Rumble and how they don't trust Rumble to stay, censor free in the long run. We're on Rumble. We are on Upscrolled. I hope Upscrolled does really well. We're going to continue to post there for as long as we can, obviously. But my experience with Rumble, even though the politics of those involved don't seem to be aligned with mine, has been amazing. They have not only have they not bothered us, they've been incredibly supportive to us. I have a point of contact with Rumble. I texted them last night. I said, I have Glenn Greenwald on tomorrow. You think you can homepage us? Sure. Let us know. They've been fantastic. You were one of the big launches on Rumble. Your show was, as I understand, the first on my radar, certainly, to sort of go there and stream exclusively there, where you have total free reign to say essentially whatever you want. What do you say to people who express, some nervousness about Rumble because of the, Peter Thiel investment and the sort of apparent sort of right-leaning sort of political bent over there?
Well, I think speculation like that, Peter Thiel has some involvement. I want to talk about that in a second. Therefore, they're probably going to censor speech that is contrary to the right. Maybe that's appropriate when a company is just beginning and you're trying to be skeptical about the promises that they make. But Rumble's been around now for many years. They have a long track record. And my experience at Rumble is not just the same as yours, but it's the same as every single person I know there. There are, it is primarily a right-wing site because it actually gained popularity when the focus of censorship under the Biden administration was against MAGA types who were being censored during COVID. Exactly. They went to Rumble as a refuge. But as a company, they aggressively try to lure left-wing and other anti-establishment podcasters from the left There are a lot of them there. Not once has any of them ever been censored. Rumble has a close relationship with the Trump administration. Probably 80% of my shows this year were devoted to vehemently denouncing the Trump administration.
Right.
They promoted me. They supported me as much as ever. And here's the thing, like, this is what I think. And by the way, just on Peter Thiel quickly, he did make a big investment early on because he saw the potential for growth. I'm not even sure he has any investment in the company anymore. If he does, it's trivial. Chris Pavlovsky has always been the largest majority shareholder by far. He's the CEO. It's a publicly traded company. Peter Thiel has nothing to do with the management of Rumble. And if he does, it's not to censor anything. But here's the thing, I think, and this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, so maybe it's a good note to end on, which is a lot of people love to say the values that they believe in because they think it makes them look good. Like Elon Musk loves to go around saying, I'm a big free speech guy. When Elon Musk was presented with orders of censorship from Brazil or India, he would initially refuse to obey, and they would just ban him from the entire country. He got banned for more than a month from Brazil. He's been banned in various other countries. And the minute that happens, he capitulates, he goes on his knees, and he says, okay, from now on, we won't question your censorship orders. And then he gets reinstated. When that happened to Rumble, Rumble is banned to this day in Brazil because they not only initially refused, but continued to refuse to comply with unjust censorship orders. Same in France. I remember being in France with my kids, and I wanted to see something on my show, and I tried to access it without a VPN, and it said Rumble's not available in France because they refused to take off RT and other Russian media outlets that the French government was deplatforming. So France threatened to ban them in the whole country. So they have actions that demonstrate the authenticity of their free speech belief. And it's so rare to find people like that, as we started off talking about, that I don't love everything about Rumble. You know, I do think they have become kind of overrun by a lot of people from MAGA, but there's good reasons for that. They would love to have more people like you and me on there. And as you said, it's definitely true. They not only tolerate, but actively support everybody who's on there because they really see their first mission as a free speech mission, not as a politicized one.
Yeah, I mean, they reached out to us when we had only like, I think 3,000 or 4,000 followers, but they saw we had good live stream numbers and they saw we were sort of building something cool. And so they reached out to us, and yeah, they have just been extremely helpful. And I think it is kind of an indictment of just how far the left strayed from their commitment to free speech, especially during the Biden years, that Rumble ended up sort of a de facto right-wing platform. There's no reason that a free speech site should be a right-wing site. The only reason for that is because, yes, at the time that they formed, they were a sanctuary for people being censored, most of whom at the time were on the right. You know, that's something that I think is a real shame that there's not a left-wing free speech site.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there should be like an ACLU styled free speech site, like there was one from decades ago when the ACLU was that. Maybe there'll be a Janine Eunice site.
Right.
I'll talk to her and brand her. But yeah, she's a good example. But there, as we started talking about, there are far too few of those.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it weren't for Rumble, we would not do the kind of show that we do. We would still do content, but we wouldn't do 3 live streams a week with the clip video model because we would just feel too insecure. If it were YouTube or bust, we wouldn't do the show this way because, you know, YouTube can just turn the lights off on you at any time for any reason. Like, we would still do recorded content, maybe audio podcasts, some blogging and Substack and stuff like this. But no, Rumble is really a lifesaver. So
But I could interject there. I think what you're saying is so important. I hope people reflect on that because I've seen your show before, in addition to being on it. You know, I've seen it, many times over the years, clips of it and the like. And it's not like you guys are, purveyors of fake news or some sort of like far out extremists who say the most offensive things that you could talk about that shouldn't subject you to censorship, but are typically the kind of people who do. You do very straightforward, analytical, political content. You comport yourselves in a way that tries to adhere to the facts. You do have what might be considered a radical ideology by some, but you're like the last kind of people who should be the targets of censorship in the United States. And the fact that you have to worry about that you say, oh, thank God for Rumble, because at least there's a place we can go where we don't ever have to give consideration to that. That's why I went to Rumble. It wasn't because I'm not the type of person who gets censored either. I wasn't being censored on YouTube or Twitter. It was that the idea, the internet is very important to me. Like I've done a lot of things of the internet. And the idea that you have a place that preserves free speech on the internet, not as a branding exercise like X, but as a real commitment like Rumble. That's why I went there, because I wanted to support that because of how important I think it is. And I think your anecdote illustrated that perfectly.
Yeah, no, they absolutely do walk the walk. They have a track record. And for people who are too cynical to believe that, even if you think of it just as a branding exercise, at this point, Rumble's brand is that they are free speech. So the first time that they betray that and they knock someone off for misinformation, there goes the whole brand. That would be business suicide for them. So, like, even if you only believe in selfish motive, they have no selfish motivation to go back on that promise, because that's their core brand at this point, is that they don't censor.
To the point that they actually got censored in not small countries, but large, important ones, in defense of that principle.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think we all know where you can find System Update on Rumble. Now that we just did a 7-minute ad for it.
Commercial, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It was all unpaid, though, so you can trust the credibility of it.
That's right. That one was on the arm for anybody at Rumble watching. Glenn Greenwald, such a pleasure. Always an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much for making time. I've been a huge fan of yours for 51 years, and so I really appreciate you taking time and coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks for those nice words. Always great to come on anytime.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Have a great one. Bye-bye. All right. I think we got in right before the buzzer there. Looked like the internet was just about to go out. And we just made it right to the very end. Good timing. All right, everybody. Well, thanks very much for being here. We got 2,562 in the live YouTube chat. So that's good for one. 2525. And we're at 862 likes. Let's smash that like button even more. You know, it's funny. You guys were mentioning the placement of this plant. It's actually funny because I had a little alfalfa sprout from my haircut, and I was like, what if I move the plant behind my head? That'll hide the alfalfa sprout because it'll look like it's part of the plant. But then the alfalfa sprout went down, and it just looked like I had a plant behind my head for no reason. So I moved it back. But yeah, I was aware of that. I was absolutely aware of that. So thanks, everybody, very much for being here. We got our next guest waiting in the wings here. So I'm going to, Jose, if it's cool, I'm going to read a few super chats before I bring you on. Perfect. Look, what an accommodating guy. Jose Vega giving me the thumbs up from backstage. Michael Castillo says there's a restaurant here named El Charro Cafe that introduced carne seca to the U.S. in 1922. I called them yesterday about prices by the pound. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, you know what, Michael? Hold on. Michael sent a chat before the show. I think that StreamYard did not pick up. You said, good morning and evening, gentlemen. Keaton, I wanted to know if I could bring some carne seca. There, see, the context really matters for that chat. Carne seca from Tucson, Arizona, for that's where it originated. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. So you're talking about bringing some meat to New York? All right. Bring some meat to the Bronx. We can go with Jose. We'll eat some carne seca and go to a Yankee game. Michael says Candace is set to have Bassem Youssef on her show this afternoon. We are all Palestinian. Oh, that's cool. That'll be great. I watched Jimmy's show yesterday, says Michael, and it's one of his best ever. I'd never heard of Stu Peters. Yeah, I heard of Stu Peters. We just featured Stu Peters in a clip, and yeah, he had him on yesterday. I caught about half of that interview, I think. I caught 15, 20 minutes. I don't know how long it went on. But yeah. No, he's good. He's good. I hadn't watched much of Stu Peters stuff either, but Russ put him on my radar when we used his clip the other day. Oh, there we go. That's the one I missed. Me Shoot Skeet, thanks for the $3 super sticker. French Laundry, thanks for the $4.99. Appreciate that very much. Heavy Snack 39.85 says unleaded gas in November 2026 is $7.89. That Venezuelan crude is thick AF. Paul Singer's U.S. taxpayer-subsidized refineries are under construction. MAGA. This is Iran's fault. They hate our freedom. Yes. Thank you, Heavy Snack. Appreciate that very much. Okay. Garble Gack says, let me ask you something, please. All right. You can ask me whatever you want. Jim Taleb, thanks for the $3 super sticker. Appreciate that very much. All right, we will get to some more here. Let's see. Did I copy over? I'm a little behind on the Rumble rant since I am a one-man show today, but I'll read these and then we'll get to the rest in due time. Worry not. Vienticus Prime says, since I'm bad-mouthing influencers, Nick Fuentes is a gay Ben Shapiro. That was from yesterday, right? Yeah, that was from the other day. Sorry. Nocturnal Humans, as I look for Jimmy Dore on Upscroll, there were already 2 accounts that were probably fake. Can you ask him if he's going to be on there and what his name is? Yeah, I'm not sure if he's on there yet. I'm sure he will be. But yeah, the impersonator accounts are always a problem, especially on smaller, newer platforms. We had an impersonator on Telegram. We've had a couple impersonators on Rumble. They didn't make videos in our name, but they commented, as do dissidents. In very GG satirical news, low IQ IDF blonde Kaja Kallas says repression cannot go unanswered as UA designates IRGC as a terrorist organization. EO Shush says, Keaton, can you ask Greenwald, does he know about James Banford's story on how Bibi colluded with Trump in 2016? Years of Russiagate, nobody talks about this, especially now with Epstein. Yeah, I'm sure he is aware of that story, but you're right. I mean, that story really did kind of just come and go, and it's because, the media does not want to talk about that. Even MSNBC, they had their Russiagate story. They just had the wrong country. Ask Glenn considers M. Tracy his Baldrick. Thank you, Professor Brown Notes. Here we go. What else we got here? Contract Crook. Glenn doing big boy shit now, my ninjas. We had Glenn on for the first time in December 2003. It was a week of heavy hitter guests. We had Matt Taibbi, Katie Halper, and Glenn Greenwald on back to back to back in December of 2003. That was the last time we had Glenn on the show. And, I told Russ I'm going to try to get Glenn Greenwald for Thursday because, Glenn is very busy. He does shows 5 nights a week. So I wasn't sure we'd be able to get him. But when I told him we were going to trash Matt Walsh, I think that's what did it. I think that's what sealed the deal. I know the way to his heart, and it seems to have worked. So we appreciate Glenn coming on, as always. All right, everybody. Well, we are going to bring in our next guest of the afternoon. Let me just make sure I got all my stuff in order here because I got some stuff. Okay, hold on. I got to rearrange something really quick before we bring in Jose, because I'm doing this show slightly out of order from the way I thought I was going to do it now. So I got this one, and then I got this one coming in here. Beautiful. Okay. Now we're ready for him. All right, everybody. You all know our next guest. He is running for Congress in the Democratic primary and then as an independent in November with the aim of unseating Richie Torres, defending champion of our show. Please welcome anti-Semite Jose Vega. Jose, thanks for being here.
You guys really don't make it easy. They're looking for anything. Like when Glenn made that joke, first of all, to the ADL, I don't agree with what Keaton just said about the weather and this and that. I have to make that disclaimer every 5 minutes with you now. So thank you.
Yeah, there we go. Well, hey, I wanted to, so the reason why I said that, I was being satirical, because, you caught some garbage from Stop Anti-Semitism, which is, I guess, is a rite of passage now. If you are a political actor and you're making a big enough impact, eventually Stop Anti-Semitism comes for you. So they tweeted out this video, outrageous political video taken out of 1938 Nazi Germany, blaming poverty on wealthy Jews. So this is the video that they thought was really hateful.
Yeah.
Live in the Bronx. Some of the richest Zionists live in the Bronx.
The Bronx is one of the poorest districts in America, but also has some of the richest Zionist millionaires in America, too. How is that?
Because rich people like to live in areas where they can buy the politicians easily, like Richie Torres, who is bought and controlled by Zionist influencers and millionaires who all live in Riverdale, while also this district, being one of the poorest congressional districts, has the lowest voter turnout rate. So the less people that vote, the easier it is to buy a politician.
Jose Vega. Thank you very much.
So fuck Richie Torres and vote for Jose Vega.
There you go. On the once great platform of TikTok. Hey, Richie Torres himself tweeted this out. My opposition sees anti-Semitism not as a tragedy, but as a strategy. Wow, that's really clever wordplay there. One of my opponents appears in a despicably anti-Semitic video with Eric Warsaw, who once lionized Nick Fuentes, a notorious Holocaust denier, as a hero. In that video, my opponent demonizes the Jewish residents of Riverdale, trafficking in the oldest and ugliest anti-Semitic tropes about money. No amount of defamation or disinformation will ever shame me out of representing every community in my district. We are one Bronx, and no amount of Jew hatred will divide us. Well, you put out a response to this. We're going to play this and then talk more about it.
And I'm running for Congress in the 15th Congressional District in the Bronx. Just yesterday, my opponent, Richie Torres, did not have the guts to use my name when he attacked me. Richie Torres knows that I regard his policy towards Gaza and to the 70% of the poor people in this district as one and the same. I call it malign neglect, where innocent people are called collateral damage, rather than by their rightful names. And just like Gaza needs an oasis plan with young Palestinians in the center, reconstructing Gaza and all of Southwest Asia, the Bronx needs one too, and I call it the Space Civilian Construction Corps, where young people of the Bronx will be given access and tools to some of the best engineering education anywhere in the country to rebuild the Bronx and other cities and other parts of this country to make them industrial heartlands again. This makes Richie look so bad. What does he do? Last night, he puts out an attack on me, calling me what? An anti-Semite? This is not surprising at all, given that another opponent, Amanda Septimo, actually just dropped out of the race, making it harder for Richie Torres to hide his ugly face from his constituents. Let me repeat what I've said over time and time again. My congressional district is the poorest congressional district in the entire country. We have the highest child poverty rate in anywhere in the United States. And yet, in my district, one of the richest neighborhoods in all of the United States is located in the Bronx, also known as Riverdale. No one ever associates Riverdale with the Bronx, and neither does Richie Torres. For him, the money you have determines your speaking rights and your right to be heard by him. And as far as he's concerned, the poor majority have nothing to say. I don't agree. I believe that promoting the general welfare is a constitutional duty, just like the preamble says, and Richie Torres is in deep violation of that. While Richie Torres and his owners in the war party keep the Bronx poor, it is because I have denounced mass murder in Gaza, because I denounce war with Iran, the kidnapping of sovereign leaders in Venezuela, or NATO's war in Ukraine, that I am now being labeled an anti-Semite. Yelling anti-Semitic is intended to shut me up. But the military financial complex will not shut me down. Now the question is, what are you prepared to do? Do you want a congressman with guts or a congressman with issues? It should be obvious that whether it's Gaza to Minnesota, we need a new security and development architecture. We need a new deal for the Bronx. But who's going to stand up for that? I'm asking you to stand with me. Because if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And now's the time, and I'm the person to back.
All right. Really well done stuff, my friend. As always, you've mastered the political art of the pivot, which is, take the issue and, get back on message. Really well done video. And, look, we joke about the Stop Anti-Semitism account because they're so ridiculous. But as we've seen, in their targeting of Miss Rachel, she's a softer person than us crazy bastards, but she really takes it to heart. And not only does she take it to heart, but there are fucking crazy people out there, who see that and really take it to heart. And so it is, in all seriousness, a serious thing to be singled out in that way for such obviously dishonest reasons. What was your first reaction when you saw that they had sort of set their sights on you?
Well, first of all, on Miss Rachel, she had no reason to be apologizing in that way, and she was crying, and because she's a very good person, and she obviously didn't mean to like an anti-Semitic comment. But as to how I reacted, when we recorded that video, that's Eric Warsaw's video. It's not my video. I mean, he just asked if I wanted to be interviewed, and I said sure. And I kind of hated the way I looked in it because I had a sinus infection. So like this whole side of my face was puffy. So I kept trying to keep my face at this angle, and it just. So I was pissed off that of all the videos that went viral, that one goes viral, where my face is puffy. But
if you're gonna call me an anti-Semite, at least get my good side.
But the thing that I mean, honestly, I started freaking out because I was like, oh my God, you know, I just like the way I found out was I was getting DMs and emails and phone calls to our campaign accounts, to my personal accounts, from people who are just like, you're a vile anti-Semite, this, that, and the other. And I was like, whoa, okay, where is this coming from? And then I saw the Stop Anti-Semitism post went up. And I was like, oh, God. And then I saw Richie Torres put out the statement. And my first thought was, oh, God, is my campaign manager going to kill me? Did I do something? Did I say something? You know, there's this sort of thing that people don't talk about when it comes to being a public figure of anything, about how these attacks are meant to go after you and mess with your head. You know, I started thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I'm not just a podcaster. I'm not just an influencer, right? Where I can just, this is water off a duck's back. I'm putting myself out there asking people to vote for me, to support me, because we're trying to, unseat Richie Torres, you know. And so getting past the initial reaction of freaking out, the way you put it was, you know, you said you mastered the art of pivoting. Well, you know, that has to do with the people who helped me and advised my campaign, who have a way of, and this is the importance of campaign managers and people who think not in your position, because they're not the ones actively being attacked. So they have an ability to think clearly and think outside. And they pointed out very clearly, no, you pointed out the wealth disparity that exists in your neighborhood. There was nothing wrong with what you said, you know. And so, you know, in sort of crafting our response, it's like, well, yeah, wait a minute. No, I'm not going to, you know, let you make this about anti-Semitism. If you apologize, like Miss Rachel did, what they do is the list of demands that they make on you. Oh, okay, well, if you want to make this right, you have to do this. Oh, you did that? Okay, well, now you have to do this, this, and this, and this. The ADL put out a long screed about Miss Rachel. Whether or not she did or did not intentionally like an anti-Semitic comment is, why didn't she use her platform to denounce all of anti-Semitism? And if she did that, why don't you use your platform to teach more people about how you know, so you never apologize for something that you didn't say and that you didn't do. You know, and here, so we start looking into who actually lives in this district, right? You have this guy who Glenn Greenwald debated, Shabbos Kestenbaum, who works for PragerU, you know, who's just a total sophist. He's my age. He's this guy who sued Harvard. He was on Piers Morgan when Michael Fake announced his campaign against Richie Torres. You know, just completely demolished Michael Fake, by the way, because Michael Fake isn't a real person. But, you know, he said he's a proud Richie Torres supporter because he lives here in the district, lives up in Riverdale, of course. But it's not just, you know, Zionists. It's not just, you know, people who are wealthy in one religion or another. It has nothing to do with that. It's about the billionaire class. There's a PAC that has an office here in Riverdale called NORPAC, NORPAC. You know, you get called an anti-Semite if you call anything the Israeli lobby, but in their website, they label themselves as the Israeli lobby. That send 1,000 people to Washington, D.C. every year to lobby on behalf of the government of Israel for its security and to denuclearize Iran. That's here in the Bronx, in the poorest congressional district. And you know who's a big funder of NORPAC? Paul Singer. I don't know what religion Paul Singer is, but why is it that 26 of his employees from Elliott Management fund Richie Torres and have given him over $75,000 over the last few years, right? So you also have people like Barry Weiss who have Richie Torres on her podcast all the time, talking about what a great congressman he is for Israel, this, that, and the other. See, so my fight, okay, is against the billionaire class who Richie Torres thinks has a bigger voice than the majority of the people that make up this district who are living either at or underneath the poverty line. It's like I said in my video, Richie Torres believes that you have to buy the right to be listened to. And as far as he's concerned, if you don't got the money, he doesn't care what you have to say. He only cares if you can fund his campaign or not. And so, that's why we're being called out in this way, because we're actually going after the people that actually own him or rent him. And that's what makes us a threat, because it wasn't just the stuff he showed. They also put out news articles on the Jewish News Syndicate, on a few other news media places, with the hilarious headline: congressional candidate in the Bronx says Richie Torres is owned by Zionists. And the comments were just like, yeah, where's the lie? This is America's candidate, clearly. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go off like that, but yeah.
No, that's why you're here. I thought that was great. I mean, there's so much of that that I could follow up on, but it's a similar dynamic to as it pertains to the genocide in Gaza. Now you can't critique genocide if the Jewish state is committing a genocide, because that's anti-Semitic. So it's the same thing here at home. You can't critique money in politics if, in this circumstance, the people who happen to be contributing a lot of that money are disproportionately Jewish. And I say disproportionately Jewish because I know Riverdale has a sizable Jewish population, but I don't have demographic reports on who donates to who by religion, and I don't think you claim to have that either. Your point was about the influence of this wealthy part of the Bronx on this politician who serves, or is at least supposed to serve, most of the Bronx. And the income disparity there is just incredible. My wife, Amanda, went to college in Riverdale. She went to Manhattan College. And so, she knows that area pretty well. I've only been a handful of times. Go ahead.
Let me just add to that. When we had a town hall here in the Bronx, we had it here in the South Bronx on Southern Boulevard in a boxing gym that has now been closed, by the way. The landlord, for some reason, after we held this event called the Bronx's Gaza West with Anthony Aguilar and Josephine Gilbeau, who I know we'll talk about in a minute, but that probably bothered them, because the Bronx, I keep making this comparison, is Gaza West. You have people who live in the small part of the entire district who think that they can control and manipulate and do whatever they want to the rest of the people because they're poor. So that probably bothered them when I had this town hall called the Bronx's Gaza West, which was exactly addressing this issue too, and some of what you were talking about with Glenn in the previous segment. What they're doing over there in Gaza, I say they're already doing here in the Bronx. There were 26,000 calls all of New York City made between Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to 311 reporting the fact that they didn't have heat. How many people do you think died out in the street because they couldn't get shelter quick enough? I mean, I know Mamdani is trying some things, and, to his credit, he did shovel some places out. It's still early in his term. I'm not trying to make any decisions about Mayor Mamdani one way or another about how I feel about him. But my point is, it's like, when will that be addressed? And is it intentionally not being addressed by people like Richie Torres, because their protocol is to serve the people? Like, for example, I guarantee you, probably some of the wealthier neighborhoods, and not even just Riverdale, by the way, because they've opened up waterfront property here in the South Bronx on 138th Street in this one little strip of street where they're trying to gentrify it by calling it Sobro. I guarantee you places like that in the Bronx don't have heating problems right now. And let me just put one more point about Riverdale. 51% of Riverdale voted for Mamdani. Those people should be working on my campaign. That's just the point I'll make right there. I know that there's probably a conflict going on in that neighborhood amongst everybody who lives in that neighborhood about what is going on in Gaza, about who they do want ruling over them or who they want governing over them. And so here's my plea to the people in Riverdale: work on my campaign instead. Talk to me. If you want me to come up there and talk about what I actually think about Gaza, Palestine, let's do it. Because Richie Torres hasn't held a town hall in 2 years. I actually think the last town hall he held was in February of 2023 when I called him an Israeli puppet to his face. I don't think he's held any other town halls since then.
Well, speaking of the fact, you've heard from him, haven't heard from him recently, haven't talked to him recently. You obviously did that action in the restaurant where he was sitting there, and you confronted him. But to my knowledge, this tweet here that he sent out about you, after your, Stop Anti-Semitism name drop. To my knowledge, that's the first he's ever tweeted about. I didn't name you, but he actually went out of his way to mention. I can't say that's true as a fact because, as is true of probably half of this audience, we are blocked by Richie Torres on Twitter. So his stuff doesn't appear in my feed. I have to search for him, and then I can read his posts when I search for him, which I do very rarely. But in this case, I happen to know it kind of blew up, so I looked for it. But I think it says a lot that he's having to go out of his way to mention you. And I think this is part of what makes the strategy of running first in the Democratic primary, then as an independent in the general, really smart, is that he's calling you his opponent already because you are his opponent. The primary is just, what is it, 5 months out? What is it, in June?
June 24th, yeah.
Exactly. So things are getting heated up. Is that the first time, to your knowledge, that he's actually gone out of his way to mention you on social media?
Yeah, he hasn't even mentioned Michael Blake in such a public way. I mean, He made a couple comments that were reported in the media because he was asked, but he went out of his way to come at me personally this way. So yes, we are making a sort of big impact here. Let me just, the Gray Zone put out an excellent documentary on Betar USA. At towards the end, the guy who runs Betar, his name is Ron Tarosian, right? And this guy's like the horrible, worst of the worst kind of like Zionist, Jabotinskyite, Kahanist, was part of the youth chapter in Israel for the Kahanist movement. He says at the end, or towards the end, I'm Richie Torres and Eric Adams' biggest fundraiser. I mean, think about that, right? Like, obviously, this guy, Richie Torres, is definitely owned, and so for him to put out that statement in that way, because the way I found out he did it was I was driving with Kynan, and we put up first like just an immediate written response. I didn't make the video yet, and I was like, you think Richie Torres might have said something about this? And Kynan was like, I don't think so. He's probably just going to ignore this. But then I was like, well, just look it up anyway. And then I saw this massive paragraph, and I was like, oh my God, I really am in deep crap now. Now that I'm being called out personally this way. But, it was what it was. I would, Richie Torres is pretty intimidated. And that's the other thing, too. This is part of what I know we're going to come back to the petitioning drive, right? But like, we have to start petitioning in less than a month for the Democratic primary. So the other thing he's thinking is like, okay, maybe this guy's becoming a threat. Let's just handicap him now by putting out the word in the ethos that this guy's an anti-Semite in the Bronx so that nobody might try to sign his petition. Here's the truth. It had the opposite effect. Right. I have people calling in from the Bronx saying, I want to volunteer for you. What do I do? And I have people writing in from this district saying, oh, they're calling you an anti-Semite because you're saying something right or you're doing something right, So it's backfiring on them. But the thing is, it's only going to get worse and worse and worse, and to the point, I mean, you'll know it's really successful if we're getting the kind of level of hate that Mamdani was getting, before he won the primary and even after he won the primary too. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be nasty, but, if people want to, I'll do one plug now, and then of course I'll keep doing it. As part of the media training I go through. The media training is just guessing this stuff as I go.
Always be closing.
Oh, vote.vega.nyc. People can sign up to petition, and I'll do a bigger pitch for it later throughout the show. But just if you're motivated, there you go. Vote.vega.nyc. You can go there. You can sign up. Anyway, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I should probably always be promoting my whip. Like, look. And people could donate so I can hire a proper PR person to tell me how to do this stuff, or maybe not. I don't know. So.
No, you're doing good. I mean, what you said is so true about the sort of Streisand effect of, he went out of his way to smear you and it backfired, which is indicative of a certain tipping point that we've hit on this whole issue, zooming out to 30,000 feet, the discussion of Israel. And what's really ironic about that in the context of Richie Torres is that Richie Torres, at this time last year, or I should say at this time in 2024, end of 2024, early 2025. So at this time last year, Richie Torres was signaling pretty loudly that he was going to run for governor to challenge Kathy Hochul. he was saying she's failed New York. She can't be the nominee. In, politics speak, that means you're running. But he put the caveat. Yeah, he called her incompetent, exactly. But he put the caveat in there that if Mamdani won the Democratic primary, that he would not run for governor. And I thought that was really interesting, because what he's basically admitting is, okay, I'm going to take a Mamdani victory as a sign that I'm not viable, because it's such a rebuke of my brand of politics. Yet he still feels emboldened to take this kind of swing at you, calling you an anti-Semite, even though by his own admission, that shit was really rejected in the form of the Mamdani victory. So it seems like he was sort of breaking his own rule there a little bit.
Oh, well, absolutely. I think because the playbook is the same. They haven't figured out how do you actually manipulate, or how do you actually get around it, right? So I remember sometime in December of 2024, after Kamala Harris lost, there were people who proclaimed themselves to be Zionists going out on social media saying, like, guys, what are we doing wrong? Why are we losing the PR war? We need to come up with new strategies. And of course, people in the comments were like, maybe don't kill children. Maybe that's a good start right there. People are like, no, that can't be it. That can't be it. It's got to be something else, And their strategy has been this year, especially, oh, okay, well, we're not going to get people to stop hating Israel because they're all anti-Semites, but maybe we can focus their energy away from why is Israel leeching free healthcare off of the American taxpayer and why are we sending weapons to go and kill children? Maybe we can redirect that to why are there so many Somalians in Minnesota? Maybe immigration is a big problem. Maybe we should do something on that. Or is Qatar controlling our politics? Let's deploy Laura Loomer and these other people, right? Max Blumenthal has done some good expose on how Israel, or the Israeli Hezbollah department, that's not anti-Semitism, by the way. That's just what they call it. Hezbollah is just a word that just means explanation. And this is their official propaganda department of Hezbollah.
It's actually a kind of whitefish. He's lying. It's a kind of whitefish. It's the most expensive whitefish at Katz's Delis. You go in and you say, "Let me get a half pound of Hezbollah."
So Max Blumenthal did a good expose on how Israel has not only bought and paid a lot of influencers or creators, but also a lot of influencers of color, that have been bought off, and have just become total, walking stenographers. Like one of the articles that was published against me is by this guy named Cory Walker. You look at Cory Walker's X bio, it's always just pro-Israel, just totally like, Iran should be denuclearized, like just radical pro-Israeli propaganda. And of course, he wrote an article denouncing me because of what Richie Torres said. So you come back to this thing with Richie Torres. Now, he has to be reading the writing on the wall about, well, okay, he obviously wasn't going to run for governor if Mamdani won. Now, there's been some, like you read the political playbook and all these other, people who only had Mamdani at 1% in January and did not see it was coming. They say that a Mamdani endorsement in this district wouldn't really mean much because this district, of course, tends to lean more socially conservative, whatever the hell that means. All that means is that they have a lot of older people that vote in this district. But they know that Richie Torres, the time is coming up for him. So what did they do? They know that I'm running in the primary. And the first ever public announcement I made about that was on your show on September 17th on my birthday, when I told you guys I was thinking about doing that. And you guys gave me basically the permission to say it out loud because I was like afraid to do that. And then what happens?
He comes to the Jews to ask our permission. He's not an anti-Semite. He asked the Jews permission to do this. This comes with the blessing of the Jewish people. His candidacy is endorsed by the Jews.
So then what happens, right? Then I go to make the paperwork shift to switch myself to the Dem, right? To announce that I want to run in the primary. What do? Some DSA person throws their hat in the ring. Doesn't even officially announce. It's just an exploratory committee, and that gets all the buzz and people ignore the fact that I'm running in the primary. And then they throw this Michael Fake guy in, who was the former vice chair of the DNC, who was he ran for mayor the same year Mamdani was running. What does he do? He's calling himself the most pro-Israeli candidate out of all of them as late as May of 2025. And now I'm supposed to believe This guy who went to APAC conferences from 2012 all the way to 2021 is out here saying, oh, yeah, no, there's definitely a genocide going on. I have seen the moral clarity from the very beginning. And he was also working for defense contractors, like one called Nexstar, which was getting military contracts to make submarines. And he was the president of this company up until 2024. And I'm supposed to believe that this guy is suddenly the progressive answer to Richie Torres. No. So obviously it's done to obfuscate me as somebody who could actually present a legitimate challenge to Richie Torres if it was a one-on-one. And so here we are now at the point where they're like, wait a minute, this guy Jose might actually break through. We need to do something about this now, because if we don't, we might actually have somebody who's not going to play ball in the Democratic Party. Let me just make that clear to people, too, who think that just because I'm running in the primary, suddenly Hakeem Jeffries is my dad, and Chuck Schumer is going to be my big bear, or whatever the fuck AOC called Nancy Pelosi.
Papa Bear.
Papa Bear. Yeah, that's right, Papa
Uncle
Bear. Uncle Bear. No, both parties still need to be demolished. Absolutely, 100%. Hakeem Jeffries has utterly failed. He is completely on lockstep with the Trump party. And Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have no real intention to want to defund ICE. They just want to get this resolution bill passed. We'll see there's a shutdown coming along. But no, this strategy of running in the Democratic primary, right to independent, is going to be one that proves very fruitful. And I think we're going to make large strides here in New York City and in the country as a whole, because the important thing about people standing up and saying, you know what, let's just take down the most awful person in Congress, is that we need to give people something to do. We need people to have hope that they can continue to fight for a real, honest future. And by golly gee, I think the fact that they are attacking us this hard, this way, means that there is a chance we can take this in the primary. So let's do it,
Yeah, I think so too. And that's going to pivot into this next segment. I do want to talk a little bit about ICE and about the Democrats' demands for DHS funding. Obviously, there's a potential shutdown that is looming at the end of the week here, as Democrats are promising to vote no on DHS funding. So that would trigger a partial shutdown if a deal is not made. So I want to go over some of the demands that the Democrats are making. The American people deserve it. Democrats reveal their 3 demands to avoid a shutdown. Senate Democrats on Wednesday revealed a set of demands to overhaul U.S. immigration and customs enforcement, tying the changes to a must-pass spending bill as Congress raced toward a partial government shutdown that could begin early Saturday. After a closed-door caucus meeting, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the Democratic leader, said his party had coalesced around 3 legislative objectives that they say are necessary to rein in ICE, which they accuse of operating with little accountability under President Donald Trump. Those demands include tightening ICE's warrant requirements, introducing a uniformed code of conduct for its agents, and requiring all ICE agents be unmasked and with operating body cameras, he said. We want to end roving patrols, Schumer said, laying out Democrats' first demand. We need to tighten the rules governing the use of warrants and require ICE coordination with state and local law enforcement. Second, he said, Democrats want to enforce accountability, including a uniform federal code of conduct and independent investigations into alleged abuses. Federal agents, he argued, should be held to the same use of force standards as local police and face consequences when they violate them. Third, Schumer said, Democrats are demanding masks off, body cameras on, a reference to proposals that would bar agents from wearing face coverings, require they wear body cameras, and mandate that agents carry visible identification. No more anonymous agents, no more secret operatives, he said. These are common sense reforms, ones that Americans know and expect from law enforcement, Schumer added. If Republicans refuse to support them, they are choosing chaos over order. So, just because it's clipped separately, most people know this, you're running in the Democratic primary. Now you are promising you will stay on the ballot in November as an independent. Whether you win or lose a Democratic primary means even if you win as a Democratic Party, you'll still be able to be on as an independent either way. What is your take on these demands? What do you think of them?
I think that ICE is the Gestapo, and I think that honestly, the bare minimum should be to abolish it. You know, here's the thing. If this was really about going after criminals, if this is really about going after the worst of the worst illegal migrants who are doing this, why even have Border Patrol do this? Do we not already have existing law enforcement that is designed and made to go do this? Do we not have police that are supposed to do this? We have detectives. We have all kinds of things that already exist and have existed for a very long time to go after these criminals, right? DHS was only created after 9/11 as a pretext, and it was created so that we could help stop another, terrorist attack like 9/11. ICE's only function, and that of the DHS, is not about protecting American interests. It is about mass surveillance spying and making sure that every single American has a record on them of what they said, what they do, where they go, so that they can continue to expand the definition of what a criminal is. Look at what President Trump signed back in December, NSPM 7, National Security Presidential Memorandum 7. If you call yourself anti-ICE, anti-capitalist, anti-fascist, which is what, like 95% of your show, you are now considered a domestic terrorist.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's not my show. No, just kidding.
Right? You are now considered, to be a domestic terrorist.
Yeah, a target for investigation, legitimate grounds to infiltrate. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So when you see ICE killing people like Preddy or Good or Renee Good, what that is not that they're treating them like activists or protesters. They're treating them like, oh, you're terrorists now. And I think you played some clips before where they're recording the ICE agents, and the ICE agent goes, well, you know what, you're a domestic terrorist now. And they takes a picture, and they have all this surveillance stuff going on, right? So, there's people who have been taken, like my stepdad, for example. I know we'll have a separate segment on that, but my stepdad was illegally abducted by ICE, back in November, the week leading up to Thanksgiving. He's not a criminal. He didn't do anything. He paid his taxes just like everybody else. They were actually working on getting him a green card so that he could become a permanent resident. He was in the process of doing that, and then they just took him.
I want to actually talk about that right now. Actually, I want to fold that into this segment because I think, and forgive me if this sounds like me being a cynical sort of political schemer, but ICE is now the hot button issue in the country. You're running in a Democratic primary where a vast majority of Democrats are now on board with everything you're saying about ICE. Again, not to sound opportunistic, but the fact that your stepdad is in ICE, like you are personally affected by this is what I mean. Like you are a credible spokesperson on this issue because this has hit your family. And like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm exploiting that, but I do think that gives you a certain credibility because it gives you a closeness to the issue that most politicians do not feel. Most politicians view all of this sort of under glass. This is all stuff that happens to other people, right? I'm not saying nobody cares about it, but they're not as affected by it as you, whose stepdad is now in ICE detention in El Paso. You told me before the show that he's signed deportation papers, meaning he's willing to just leave. Okay, fine. You don't want me here, I'll go. And they still won't let him out of a cage.
That's exactly right. When my stepdad was taken, we tried to find lawyers because the lawyer that he had at first was willing to fight it. But then I made a video talking about the fact that my stepdad was taken and he was being held in Newark, New Jersey, right, which is about 20 miles west of where I'm at in the Bronx. And when I made that video, my mom and I had plans to go see him later that weekend during Thanksgiving. Before we could do that, they flew him to Arizona and then to El Paso, Texas. And I honestly think, I can't prove this, of course. I'm not in the room where they made the decision. They saw my video and they said, fuck you, and we're going to send him to Texas. And that's why he's still there. He signed self-deportation orders back in December. Okay, it's about to be February. Why is he still sitting in a prison cell in El Paso, Texas, with the worst conditions possible? Part of the reason he signed was because of the fact that he was being abused and mistreated in the jail, all of them being treated like animals, inconsistent use and access to water, odd phone hours to actually talk to this guy. And the whole time I'm like, trying to do something, but he's just getting desperate. So he's like, I'm just going to sign these papers. I can't argue with the guy. I'm not in the situation he's in, and he's still in there. He has signed papers saying, yes, I'm willing to leave. Get me out of here. Do whatever you need to do. And he's still in prison. You know why? Because a lot of these ICE facilities get federal funding per prisoner they have in these cells. They have no intention of releasing these prisoners very quickly. I saw a report of an imam who died after being in an ICE prison for 270 days, waiting a hearing. You know, he hadn't even been heard yet, and he died in one of these things, right? That's what this is about. This is about making sure it's the same prison industrial complex where people like the prison wardens and the people who own these prisons, the for-profit prisons, make a ton of money based on how many people are in there, which creates the incentive to put people in there, which creates the incentive to keep people in there. And in order to cut costs, you got to mistreat people and give them just the bare minimum, the barest essentials, and you got to treat them like caged animals, because that's what this is about. You know, and so of course, right? But because of the fact that I have been so critical of the Democratic Party, and rightly so, you don't see the Bronx Dems coming out rallying behind me saying, oh, we got to make sure this guy gets into Congress. No, because the local Democratic establishment in New York City, which is this giant corporate conglomerate machine, is interested in keeping Richie Torres in because he plays a ball, because they're part of the same thing. So I just want to make it clear, my fight, as much as it is about Richie Torres, it's very much also about Larry Ellison and Barry Weiss and the Democratic conglomerate machine. Richie Torres has only been the congressman since 2020, right? The Bronx has been the poorest congressional district for over 50 years. There's an apparatus here that needs to be dismantled. And the way to do that, of course, is to get me in very visible. And this is the year to do it. That's why we need, probably it's going to cost us $50,000 just a petition for both the primary and the independent ballot. That's the necessary dollar figure required for the infrastructure. That's the bare minimum. And people should donate at votevega.nyc if they want to see me on both the Democratic ballot and the independent ballot. Because I intend not just to make noise, but I honestly think we can get Richie Torres out. But that is largely dependent on what the people who are watching this right now do. Do you want to see me in the Congress bringing this energy on the congressional floor this time next year? If the answer is yes, you have to come out. You have to support us. You have to donate at votevega.nyc, and you have to sign up to volunteer to get me on the petitioning. Because that's the other reason why my stepdad is still in a prison cell, is because I'm running for Congress. It is definitely retribution. It's a big FU to me. And it's also like, for example, I have been sleeping in my house without heat since the snowstorm has happened. You know, like that is the condition of Richie Torres's billionaire Bronx. Okay, I bet you the billionaires don't have heating problems here in New York City. Okay, but 75% of the district probably does. And who do they call? 311. What is 311 going to do? Twiddle their thumbs and say, all right, well, hopefully somebody will come and fix it, And that is the reality of living in this congressional district. And that is the reality that is soon going to affect every single American if we don't decide to stand up right now.
Yeah, one of the things that's missing from that list of Democrats' demands is the resignation and/or firing and/or impeachment of Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary. And the thing that's really interesting about that is that you have Republicans now in the Senate, where the new DHS secretary, were she to be forced out, would have to pass confirmation, are starting to really show signs of weakness on this. They're starting to blink on this. Susan Collins, who's up for re-election this year, whose job approval numbers are absolutely abysmal. She struggles to crack 40% in the favorability ratings, much less 50. Graham Plattner's got a lot of momentum there. So she is in the political fight for her life. And because of that, she tweeted out this morning, while the Department of Homeland Security does not confirm law enforcement operations, I can report that Secretary Noem has informed me that ICE has ended its enhanced activities in the state of Maine. There are currently no ongoing or planned large-scale ICE operations here. I have been urging Secretary Noem and others in the administration to get ICE to reconsider its approach to immigration enforcement in the state. I appreciate the Secretary's willingness to listen and consider my recommendations and her personal attention to the situation in Maine. ICE and Customs and Border Patrol will continue their normal operations that have been ongoing here for many years. I will continue to work with the secretary, blah, blah, blah. In addition to Susan Collins really backtracking on this and basically bragging that ICE is scaling back their operation there, you have two Republican senators, Tom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski, call for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to resign. That was just 2 days ago. Rand Paul is calling the head of ICE and CBP in to testify before Congress. What this all adds up to is that you have now, I would say, if I had to guess, I would say, well, anywhere from 4 to perhaps 6 or 7 Republican senators who are distancing themselves from Kristi Noem, such that if the Democrats would demand her resignation as a condition to fund DHS, the Democrats could also insist that whoever her replacement is someone who can then pass through the Senate and get these Republican votes. Basically, it's a force the vote type situation where there are now enough Republicans who have cold feet about ICE to the point where if Noem were to be fired, there's a chance you could replace her with someone who isn't as horrible, because there are a decent number, I shouldn't say a decent number, but there's a small handful of Republicans who know that it is in their political interest to rein in ICE. And yet that's not part of the Democrats' demands, right? I mean, this just speaks to what we always talk about on this show and what you talk about, just the lack of seriousness as a party, to show that they are true collaborators, because they have so much leverage here, to the point where I just showed you, you have at least 3 Republicans, probably more like 4 to 6 or 7, who would be inclined to hold out for someone who is a little less psychotically evil than Kristi Noem, and yet that's not on the Democrats' list of demands. Fire Kristi Noem. That seems to be the bare minimum that I would ask for.
Well, first of all, Hakeem Jeffries was asked, so after the killing of Renee Good, are you now inclined to defund ICE? And his answer was just, it's a tragedy that she died and it shouldn't have happened. That was it. He didn't say anything. The reason Tom Tillis in particular is actually saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't, maybe she should resign, is because he's the senator of North Carolina. North Carolina was one of the first states to get the ICE operations and the ICE raids the worst of them all. Okay. I mean, some of the worst images of people getting bloodied, people who were still wearing their restaurant aprons, who were subdued in headlocks and stuff. I used one of the images from North Carolina in one video I made where someone left a voicemail to my campaign office number saying that I was lying about my stepfather. And I juxtaposed that with one of these images coming out. But what happened was that the people successfully kicked out ICE from North Carolina because people like Ray McGovern and Matthew Ho, and even our friends like Morgan Blythe, who are down in North Carolina, were out there protesting ICE. And the people they were arresting were directly impacting people who own businesses in North Carolina, in some of the more popular states like Raleigh, Greensboro, Durham, Chapel Hill, right? And so Tom Tillis, who's a Republican senator, who knows, by the way, that his state could be a swing state. He could easily lose his seat in the upcoming midterm elections, whatever his is. I think his is in 2028. He's reading the writing on the wall. He's saying that North Carolina and the people do not want this, and he has to act in a certain way. And that speaks volumes to people who are watching this right now, who are hesitant to do something about this. That's the reason why you have to act, because these people who are in power can be moved to do something, to address something. That's not an argument for keeping them there, because quite frankly, you should not settle for a politician who will always cave to what's popular, because often what's popular is not what's right. Think about when the war in Ukraine happened. Initially, February 2022, 70% of the country was in agreement. We have to support the war in Ukraine. And that wasn't right. And that's the problem with electing people like Michael Blake, by the way. Michael Blake is only saying there's a genocide because it's popular to say there's a genocide. If it wasn't popular to say there was a genocide, he would not be saying that right now. And he would still be trying to appeal to the moderate Dems here who vote in the district. And I'm here and I'm saying, no, it's time to elect principled politicians who are going to call on the impeachment of Secretary Noem and the dismantlement of DHS as a whole on principle. not because it's escalated to the point where people are now being shot and killed in the streets of Minneapolis.
Of course. I mean, you think about a group of people who are so vindicated now, the progressive, I mean, talk about coming around to something once it's popular. There were abolish ICE protests during Trump's first term. It was a contingent of progressive activists who were out there with signs in the street saying abolish ICE. No one took them seriously. They were seen as, alarmists, sort of, pie in the sky, woke activists, whatever, the line they always throw at people like that. And boy, were they vindicated in retrospect. I think, and this is the case with so much. I mean, now you have, people like Tom Steyer coming out and saying, I thought that the business community would come up with innovative solutions to the healthcare problem. But no, now I realize we need Medicare for all, right? I mean, you see this all the time where, people who actually put themselves out there to champion causes that are unpopular at the time end up vindicated in the not so long run. Ukraine, of course. I mean, when the Ukraine war started, you couldn't buy Russian vodka in liquor stores. That's how hegemonic that was. Like you had like mom and pop liquor store owners boycotting Russian products, like just so insane. And then, in fairly short order, people come around to the point where like this is now mainstream, and we're definitely there with ICE now. I mean, even outside the Democratic Party, just like generally speaking, you have a plurality of Americans saying they are for the abolition of ICE. It's close, but it's a drastic swing from when Trump took over. ICE had like a 60% favorability rating. Now it's got like a 32% favorability rating. I mean, the way this administration has gone about their business has just completely alienated every fair-minded person in this country.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's why the bare minimum now is dismantle DHS, because you can't forget that this exists in a post 9/11 surveillance state.
Sure.
And that's sort of the sort of danger too with like only saying abolish ICE, because it obfuscates Palantir's role in this. To this day, it's not officially known who designed the app for ICE to use when they scan your face and surveil you and check you by a database. But we can infer that it's Palantir because Palantir has access to internal federal data and your health data, by the way, too. So you have to take this from that standpoint of post-Patriot Act and beyond. I'm talking Bush-Obama years, who expanded the surveillance powers to ensure that they can continue to target American citizens as they please. And that's the overall thing about this as well, especially to all the bootlicking or in Tim Pool's case, the non-boot wearing people who are just bragging and saying like, this is great, this is good, this is exactly what I voted for. You think it's going to stop at illegal immigration? This is coming to you next, okay? This is going to come to you next, and it's going to be nasty because you're going to start seeing your neighbors being taken away for not being patriotic enough, because they don't want war with Iran, because they don't think we should have regime change in Venezuela. That's already happening. It's already there. The pretext is there. They just have to snap their fingers and it'll happen too. And so to my folks and my people, who are listening right now, you need to brace yourselves. I honestly believe there may be another Reichstag fire on the way. For people who don't get that reference, that was World War II. Reichstag fire was done by the Nazis to get total control by staging a fire that happened at a library. And they said, this is why we need total control. And so I think there might be another 9/11 terrorist style attack coming soon to ensure that we can put the Patriot Act on crack, to instill something, martial law or something. It's just the conditions are too ripe for it right now. And I'm saying, like, this is our last stand. If we don't do something now, especially this upcoming midterm, and if people decide not to get active, you may not have your freedoms. And I might be running for Congress from jail, and there will be other people who join me as well, who also stand up for freedom and for free expression. So I would just put that out there and say, look, that's the danger, but we have an alternative. There is a possibility for a new security and development architecture we can work with other countries. That's the thing they're afraid of. That's why they call me an anti-Semite, actually, because I'm saying maybe the United States should join the BRICS. Maybe it should join the Belt and Road Initiative. Maybe it can join these hosts of other countries around the world and saying, you know what, maybe we could just stop bombing you. Maybe then that'll also stop illegal immigration, by the way, if we stop bombing other countries. And they said, let's work with other countries. Let's work on our trade. Let's figure out, what trade deals we can make. Let's not put tariffs. Let's not do this. But that's antithetical to the people and the interests and the forces that exist in the Trump administration right now.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like the West is aligned in a militaristic pose, unlike, much of the BRICS nations. China is the emergent superpower. China has not been at war since, what was it? I forget the year. I had this at my fingertips a few shows ago. They had a small-scale invasion of Vietnam for like 30 days. And this was like over 50 years ago. I forget the date. People can Google it in the chat and post it in there. They have essentially not fired in 1979. Is that the year? Okay, that's what they're saying. 1960. The chat knows. The chat knows. So yeah, China has not been at war for almost 50 years. They've been at war for 30 days in the last half century, and yet they're an emergent superpower. That proves you can do this without an ethos of domination and subjugation. But that seems to be the MO that the West is just addicted to. And it seems fairly unique to us. I mean, I don't see China, going out there talking about how they have to do these sort of like regime change operations and convert these autonomous countries into puppet states. Like I don't see that happening. I see that as being a Western phenomenon that is, spearheaded by the United States, but endorsed by much of Europe. And that's why the balance of power is shifting. And that's why China is the next superpower, whether people want to say it or not. Everybody knows it. Every serious person knows it.
There's a good illustration of this. I think it was the ambassador of Nigeria was asked about the difference between China and the United States. And he said, when China comes to our country, they build bridges, ports, water infrastructure, and give us electricity. But when the Americans come, all they do is give us lectures. I think that right there is indicative of exactly the kind of relationship building that the Chinese are doing as opposed to the Americans. They're saying, because the Chinese have this thing called win-win cooperation, where they genuinely believe that if one country prospers, we all prosper. That's right. I think that's a great philosophy. And when you look at the investments that the Chinese make into other African countries, it's always, in their infrastructure development, into education. But when you look at American investment into these places, it's all diamond mining. It's all resource mining. We steal from these other countries.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Like Chinese involvement in Africa generally increases the quality of life of the average African. Whereas American involvement in South America basically turns the South American people into slaves to American corporations. Not only that, but they want our border closed. So, so you want to turn these countries into essential plantations for American corporations, and then you want to wall off our border so they can't leave. So what you're asking for is a form of slavery, quite literally. You want a fenced-in population of cheap workers for American corporations who are ruled over by American puppet dictators who will crush them if they get out of line and don't want to, work for essentially nothing anymore. It's such a cruel model that is rightfully giving way to a more humane order. But, like all empires, they don't go down without lashing out. And that seems to be what we're witnessing here.
Yep. Well, I hope, because I'm a believer in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, I do consider myself a patriot. I do love this country, warts and all, because I think about people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said in his Beyond Vietnam speech that when they founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, in its tenets, one of the tenets was to remind the American people of its values. And then he goes on to quote Langston Hughes in the poem, where Langston Hughes says, "America never was to me, but America must be." And I think that that's a great quote, because I think about people like Frederick Douglass, who did believe in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Even Malcolm X, who said, you know what, that document wasn't written for me. Maybe I wasn't one of those men that they considered free, but you know what? It is now. That is my document. And that's the mentality I take now. And I honestly do believe in where it says, you know, that the government only has a right as long as the people consent to be governed, you know?
Right.
And that, you know, it is the responsibility of people that when the government becomes destructive of these ends, you know, your life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to alter or abolish it. So I hope that we can go back to that ideal. I genuinely think we can, and that's what my campaign is fighting for as well. That's why I'm running for Congress, because I do believe in that independence. I do believe in what was done 250 years ago, and that's my motto too. I don't think Gouverneur Morris, who was the founding father, who lived here in the Bronx, died in the Bronx, went to the Constitutional Convention and denounced slavery, one of the only founding fathers to do so. I don't think he ever thought there'd be a guy named Jose Vega in the Bronx right now quoting him. But you know what? I am introducing myself and saying, well, I'm here. I'm here and that document is mine and I'm making it mine. And that is the idea in which I will govern and take back our government, because it is our document. It is now, and it has to be. And this is the year to do it. It's 250 years since the founding of this country. And I don't want that to be, you know, represented by the Trump administration who's going to hold a giant UFC octagon fight on the lawn of the White House on July 4th. I think that that is so perverted. That's like pornography, basically, and not at all what this country was founded for.
Well, you know, Thomas Jefferson was a Holocaust denier. I'll have you know.
Fuck Thomas Jefferson. That one you can keep. You know what? Yeah, he's the anti-Semitic one.
He's the big anti-Semite. Yeah, exactly. All right, I want to take a few super chats, and then I want to talk about our signature drive that we got coming up. All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Captain Ace Hawk says, haven't seen one Zionist who doesn't have a morality deficiency. Brainwashing has destroyed that part of the brain. Crisp shirt, Glenn. Yeah, Glenn was looking good. Got my hair cut for today, so that it wasn't. Yeah, great chat, guys. Couldn't find Glenn on Upscroll. Yeah, it's it is. What did I do with it? Did I lose it? No, I have it here. It's a weird handle. It's Greenwald Updates, at Greenwald Updates. So that is his Upscroll. You must be on Upscroll, Jose, right?
Oh yeah, I am at Jose Vega. I claimed the only Jose Vega, so I'm at.
Awesome.
I claimed Hoseby Trigger too, just so no one could impersonate me. But
right.
Jose Vega is my official handle.
There you go. And on the ground floor, the engagement is crazy. Like everything we post there gets way more engagement than on X, even though we only have 1,000 followers. So yeah.
It's been great.
It's pretty great over there so far. They need to get the website up and running though, because I want to be able to like post our videos there. Like post our like what like the stuff that we post like on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. Like I want to be able to post that there too, but it's a pain in the ass to do that from the phone. Like I can make my videos from the phone. Like I could shake my tits on my phone and upload it there. But I'm thinking of maybe using TikTok for that.
Well, what I do is if I edit something on the computer, I'll upload it to Google Drive, and then on Google Drive, I'll download it to my iPhone.
All right, that's a good workaround. See, you made a boomer of me. I wasn't sure how to do that. I'm like, how do I get the video? How do I upload videos to Upscroll from my phone? I can't do that. But no, that's the way you do it. Google Drive to download
on the phone. Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
It's a little bit of a hassle, but it
process, but it's worth it in the interim, and hopefully they'll get the website up and running soon. Can I send you ornaments and things for your shelves? Yeah, no, I got to restock my shelves. I got stuff that I could put up there, but I have to move all of this over. I'm rearranging the office here, so I have to move the shelf about 3 feet to my left. And then once I do that, once I move it, I'll fill it back up. But thanks, Captain Ace Hawk. Red French Moon says a French court ruled in Rumble's favor on or around October 14th, 2025. So Rumble is available again, but knowing Macron for how long, he's such a snake. Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. You never know when stuff like that's going to change. Sazzer78 says, I need to reconnect with Adrian, Jose's campaign about disastrous talk with the Bexar County Dems. You and Russ and Justice for Palestine. Love you and Russ. And
who is that? Because I saw that comment earlier, and I immediately flagged that to Adrian. I was like, "Do you recognize who this is?" So we were like, "We don't know who that is," but
so email the campaign.
Email the campaign. Yeah, sure.
They'll do it. I missed Tuesday Live, says Freddie X. Thanks for the $5. Kimmel gets millions to dunk on Trump each weeknight, while Corolla gets cab fare and a $75 dinner voucher to fluff waters on occasion. What a man show. Ha, good one. EO Shush. If Democrats and Republican elites both fought to keep Trump out of office, why would BB collude with Trump, who also tried to blackmail Clinton? If the Democrat, why would BB collude with Trump? Well, no, there was definite collusion between the Trump campaign and the Israelis in 2016. There's no doubt about that. We did a couple of segments on it. Oh, George says, gee, Glenn, you rock. Thanks for what you do, especially Constitution, homelessness, also plantation, sunrise here. Worked in Lauderdale Lakes for years. Nice, oh, George. China Shill says, we shouldn't turn the page on this administration. They're all criminals that belong in prison. Every ICE agent too. Yeah, no, look, I think that's the part of it that, of course, is totally valid. Like, on one hand, yeah, you have to have accountability for actual crimes, but on the other hand, you don't want to expand that crackdown too much, because once you take it to the realm of persecution for opinion, well, that's just a downward spiral. Both sides will engage in that in an escalatory manner. But no, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, China Shill. Keaton, you wear flannel, so I asked, does Matt Walsh have corny banjo music and a hint that he splits logs for his wood-burning stove like Tucker does? I never watch him. I don't watch him either. But I know he does do the flannel and the beard thing. But yeah, no, I don't know if I've ever clicked on a Matt Walsh video. I've just seen clips of his emerge on Twitter and stuff, but I've never gone out of my way to watch him. What's that?
I just on Twitter, I just watch his bad takes, or his list, read his bad takes. That's it. You know, I don't go out of my way to watch anything that guy does.
Yeah, no, never. This administration being the most Black Lodge Monty Python one, I could see Walsh as runner-up in a wife-beater Olympic sketch. Thank you, Professor Brown. Nope. Mark Dansky says Barry Weiss at CBS is the definitive example of the circumcised Peter principle. Let's see here. To be honest, Eric Warsaw sounds like a vaguely anti-Semitic name. Not as bad as Eric Berlin, though. Good one. So how'd you get in touch with them? What did they just say? He wants to interview you? Was that done out? It's a little hard to tell because, like, it's a TikTok video, so they could, like, layer foregrounds over backgrounds and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, he wanted to interview me and Diane. Diane's running for president. No big deal. Just, you know, Diane.
Oh, she made that official? I didn't know that.
She made that official. Yeah.
I missed that.
You to the lunch or something. Well, it's official. She's running for president, and so he wanted to interview us, and I said, yeah, sure, no problem. And he made the videos, you know, and he put them up himself. I don't play the guilt by association game because, like,
yeah, no, of course not.
No, Michael Fake is out here posting pictures of him with Obama. How many people did Obama kill? Right. You know, and that's also true. Like me personally, I think Nick Fuentes is some kind of Fed, at the very least, if not just like totally. When he said, you know, my beliefs are that of the people in Israel, we'd want the same thing. Just, you know, the Jews should stay over there and white people should be over here. You know, that made it very clear to me. But even then, Nick Fuentes hasn't killed anybody compared to people who have had the power to drone strike. You know, and
I agree. I agree with
you. You know, so like I should be allowed to talk to whoever I want, you know, and not get the sort of finger wagging from people who hang out with war criminals like Hillary and Bill Clinton all the time.
I agree 100%. All right. So Jose Vega's here. He's running for Congress first as a Democrat in the primary and then as an independent in the general election. But because you are running on both ballot lines, or at least attempting to run on both ballot lines, that adds this extra requirement of signature gathering. So you need to put together 2 signature drives, one for the Democratic Party campaign and then one for the independent campaign. The Democratic Party campaign comes first. There's all kinds of really sort of complicated rules in New York State that are designed to make things difficult for candidates like yourself. That's why almost no one does what you're doing. They either choose to run as a Democrat and forego the option to run as an independent, or vice versa, which is what you did last year. But because you have an infrastructure built up both through the LaRouche organization and through your prior campaign that you ran, you are able to do both, and you have to do both starting at the end of this month. So why don't you tell us about the signature drive that's coming up?
Yeah, I'll talk about it from a conceptual standpoint first before I talk about it from the pragmatic stuff. Getting me on the ballot, especially in a state like New York where they make it very difficult and it's draconian, basically. You only have a certain window of time to get the number of signatures needed. Day one is February 24th. And if somebody signs, let's say Michael Fake's petition over mine first before they sign mine, then they can only sign for one candidate. They will check and see if anybody signed both. That person has to go to whoever they signed first. So basically, we want to be done on the first week, which February 24th to the 1st of March. We want to be done. We need 1,500 minimum signatures to get on the ballot, minimum valid signatures. The other thing, of course, is that the Torres campaign, the Michael Blake campaign, any random New Yorker is allowed to look at my signatures. And if I were to hand in only 1,500 exactly, they would just need to find one signature that, whether the handwriting is bad, whether that person isn't registered to vote where they thought they were registered to vote, that would instantly disqualify me. So I have to get at least 4,500 signatures. And I want to get that done in 1 week. That's just under 1,000 signatures a day. Now, we were getting about 800 signatures a day when you came out to petition for me last time in 2024, and I was aiming for 1,000 a day, and that was quite ambitious. But because you needed more for the independent ballot line, that starts mid-April, and we don't know the exact date just yet, but that starts mid-April, April 15th or so, and you need 3,500 signatures valid, and they need to be done within 6 weeks as well. And it's the same rules. Somebody can look at the signatures and say, you know what, these aren't valid or these are valid. So it's triple the requirement. Basically, we need 10,000 signatures to get on the independent ballot line. So basically, we're going to be petitioning, or we're going to be in a petition season from February 24th all the way to May. That is a large chunk of time you have to both petition for the Dem and then the independent. I want to be done with these quick, so that I can focus our energy on campaigning as opposed to just petitioning. I want to be able to be door knocking, focusing more on talking about policy as opposed to just getting people to sign. And I need people to come out and support me. I need people who want to be a part of that, what I'm calling, although other people in my campaign think it's cheesy, I'm calling it a winter offensive. It's going to be cold, might be cold, end of February, you can't tell. And we want to be done in 1 week. We want to get 4,500 signatures from February 24th to March 1st. We want to basically know that we can be on the ballot by the end of March 1st. And then we want to petition again mid-April all the way to the end of May for the independent ballot line. And we are going to need a lot of people to come out and petition. So if you are somebody who's either already in the New York City area or New York State and you're registered to vote, that is the best thing. That is the best thing. If you're registered to vote, and if you're registered to vote as a Democrat, which, or you haven't, if you're not, you have until February 14th to change your voter registration to Democrat to vote for me. You can be, and to petition for me. You can be a witness. So if you're a New Yorker and you're a New York Dem voter, you can petition for me. If you're a New York voter and you refuse to join the Democratic Party and you want to petition for me on the independent line, that's good too. But that's not till mid-April. We want to get on the Dem ballot line. So if you go on my website at votevega.nyc and you hit the volunteer button, we will coordinate with you and we will call you personally to get you out here to work with us so that you can petition with us, because we need to give the people of the Bronx a voice. I was talking earlier about the Declaration of Independence, and I was talking about how this is what the consent of the governed is supposed to look like. Well, one of the ways we can give people a voice is by telling them, by showing them that if they sign our petition, they are saying that we want to see somebody like Jose on the ballot, that we want to have the ability to vote for Jose Vega on the ballot, especially when there are people out here who are suffering from a lack of heat, when there are people who are out here who are suffering on poverty and their representative only cares about the people with money. The way to give people a voice is to have them sign our petition. And we need people to sign up on the website at votevega.nyc. We'll be holding every Saturday from now on. We're going to be holding an orientation for people to come and learn how to petition for us. And the last thing I'll say is we need donations. We need, like I said earlier, $50,000 is what it's going to cost us to get on the Dem primary line and on the independent ballot line. That is the only way in which we're going to be able to fight back, is by getting me on the ballot so that we can actually have a shot at winning this and getting a representative in there who's going to speak for the people of the Bronx, who's going to speak for all of you who have been disenfranchised from the Democratic Party and decide now's the time to stand up. So just to reiterate, if you are able to come out and petition for us, that is the most important thing. If you can't, if you're in another state, and by the way, even if you're not a New York State voter, if you want to come in and you want to petition, we can make that happen. You just have to be paired with somebody who is a witness. So even if you're a non-New Yorker, you can also sign up too. We had people fly in. You remember this, Keith?
Yeah.
People came from St. Louis, Missouri, North Carolina. If you're a non-New Yorker, you can still come out and petition. The rules are a little different for you. We'll have to pair you with a New Yorker, but you can come out and petition too. It's all hands on deck, and it's going to be a fight for our lives, basically. And they're going to do everything they're going to do to get us off of the ballot. That's the other thing. We present such a major threat to them that getting on the Democratic ballot will basically solidify the fact that we have to, that we are a major, major threat.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, when I came out and I canvassed with you guys last time, yeah, we had people from all over the country come there. Now for the Democratic Party canvassing drive, if you're not a registered New York Democrat, you have to be paired with a registered New York Democrat when you're out there.
That's exactly right. You need somebody witnessing you. Somebody at the end of the day has to sign the petition ballot saying, I witnessed all these people who signed this petition.
And that person has to be, sorry to cut you off, but I just want to make sure I have this right, because I do plan on coming out and helping with the Democrat drive, but I'm not a registered Democrat. So I would need a witness. I can still do it, but I would need a witness.
Yeah. So let's say it's me and you.
Watch over me while I do it. Is that right?
Yeah. Let's say it's me and you, right? I'm now, sorry, I get sick every time I say this. Oh, I'm a Democrat now here, and as a result, I can witness. So if you're holding a clipboard and you're asking someone to sign, you just have to say, "Hey, Jose, just look over here. I'll look over there. I'll witness that person
and then you
sign
for it, right?"
Yeah, exactly. That's
okay.
right.
All right, so that's still doable then. Okay, because as long as I'm able to do that. See, I didn't know you were starting on the 24th. I thought you were starting on the 20th. I thought you were doing a 28th event, which I can't do because my wife works on the 28th and her job sucks now where it's a hospital and it's horribly run. And so they don't let her switch dates anymore. It's really awful. But if you're starting the 24th, I'm sure we can make a date work that week. Like I'm sure I could find some day from the 24th on through that week to come down.
That would be
as long as I'm able to do it, like which it sounds like you're saying I would just have to. Somebody else would have to play the role that I played in the independent drive because I'm not a Democrat, right? So someone would just have to watch over me and sign for my shit.
Exactly.
Right.
I would say the reason we were saying 28th was because that's the Saturday, and we thought it would be easier because we had initially thought the 27th was the first day. It's actually the 24th.
Okay, we'll figure something out. Yeah.
But so you're publicly saying you'll come down and help us?
Yeah, we'll figure something out for some day that week. I'm sure we can make one of those days work.
Absolutely. That would be great. Yeah. And so if people want to help us, sign up to volunteer at votevega.nyc, New Yorker, non-New Yorker, New Yorker, registered Dem, not registered Dem, all hands on deck. We need you here in the streets of the Bronx. Every Saturday from now on, we'll be hosting orientations, both in the office and also virtually on Zoom. So sign up. I will call you personally to thank you. And the other thing is, like I said, donations. It's going to cost us $50,000 to do a bare minimum to do petitioning just for both of these drives, and that's not even factoring in stuff like our propaganda, like our little poster, little cards here that we're going to be handing out as well. We want to produce more of those, really, and we also want to do hats and shirts and stuff to identify people as petitioners for us. Okay, so honestly, it's going to cost us like $100,000. So I'm shooting too low. We need $100,000 bare minimum just to get through the next 2 months of petitioning. It's going to be absolute hell, but it's going to be a lot of fun too. And if the more people that come out and petition for us and help us, the easier the process will be. And I honestly think we can get the first round of petitioning done in the first week. And you can join me and Keaton as we go door knocking and see if there's any warm places we can find to get signatures.
There we go. All right. Excellent. Jose, votevega.nyc is the website. So please go ahead and enter that into your URL to get yourself involved. All right. We'll take some more super chats. Jose, I got a segment on the West Bank that I want to do before we end the show. Do you want to stick around and do it with me, or do you have to go? It's up to you.
No, I'll do it. I can do a Russell impression if you want. Like, I can do,
yeah.
Look, kid, you've got to cut it out with the fucking Tulsi Gabbard shit, man. You got to stop.
There you go. You're signed. You're hired. Oh boy. Rest in peace, Michael Parenti, 1933 to 2026. Indeed. Russ did a good tribute to him on our intermission last Sunday.
That was actually, I wish I had, I didn't watch a lot of Michael Parenti, but there was a clip somebody posted in his honor where he's talking about a book that he wrote, one for his father. And his father says, I can't read this, son. And he goes, oh, don't worry. Most of the college kids don't read it either. He's like, no, I literally can't read this. I'm not literate. And he spoke about the tragedy of being illiterate and that he would support anybody who wants to bring literacy to people. And I thought that is such a great, I will support anybody who wants to make the children of the Bronx or of the United States or of Gaza literate. I think that is such a noble cause. And so, yes, rest in peace, Michael Parenti.
Absolutely. Axel Strife, member for 32 months. Wow, look at that. OG Axel Strife over there. Watching the entirety of established media fall for an AI video is reminiscent of WMD's. Right, he's accepting a legacy media story is quite the turn. Thank you. Which AI video? Which what AI video did the established media fall for? I'm not sure what that reference is. Yay, love to see Jose, says Quiet Cowboy. Look at that, I got a fan over there.
Love to see
Rock
you too.
McDonald says everything's a scam, everything's a lie. I'm in the MAGA base and I'm gay. IMGAY. Oh, I ruined the rhyme, but it's funnier if you just say I'm gay. It's funnier if you abandon the rhyme. I stand with Israel means I kneel for Netanyahu. Exactly. Truth Seeker says Jose is 100% correct. We already have police to catch violent criminals. We don't need a federal force just because a few of those criminals might be here without documentation. Exactly. Sorry, it's Stephen Rindorf here in San Antonio, Texas. All right, that's who messaged us before. That's who you were wondering about. So there you go. You should put a Jose Vega Funko Pop on the shelf, Keaton. Yeah, you should make Jose Vega Funko Pops. Those would be cool. Those would be good. Okay, let's see. What do we got over here? We got some Rumble Rants. Olympus Scout. Why hasn't Jose been on Bad Faith podcast? Bree had others running against Torres on. You've been on her show before, haven't you? You've been on.
I was on in March of 2025. Yeah, when I was still just an independent. I mean, we've spoken. She said she'll have me back on. That was at the end of December, though. So I know that but it'll happen hopefully.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe people should politely ask her where's Jose. I don't know.
There you go.
Politely.
Just a nudge, as they say. Dean W. This country needs more people like Jose Vega, well informed and unafraid. Best of luck. There you go. Mark Cars for Ice. Thank you, Freddie X. Vienticus Prime says everything's a scam, everything's a lie, everything's so goddamn expensive. Stuff is harder to buy. That is true, my friend. Vienticus Prime says, just had a random thought. If Rothschild's Amalek Nation of Israel, TM, doesn't like calling it a genocide, let's grant their wish. It's an industrialized, AI-driven massacre of Palestinians. That's right. Okay. We will move right on along here, folks. After one thing I got to do. Sorry. Running it myself today, so bear with me. Got a word from a sponsor of ours, a musical sponsor. It's called Love Songs to My Favorite Politicians, and it's a musical comedy album inspired by the 2024 election. features Red versus Blue, a pop punk jam that explores the two parties, the people who look to them for answers, the commentators who cheerlead for them, and the ones who are caught in the middle. Yeshua, a pop song that argues that Jesus was possibly a commie libertarian. One Asshole, Two Cheeks, a romantic ballad, a love letter to Trump and Obama. Natural Born Killers is a jazzy track about baby killers. Well, not babies that kill, but killers of babies. Econ 101, a hip-hop verse about economics, and more. Find love songs to my favorite politicians by a bard and a guitar. That's the artist name. So search a bard and a guitar on your favorite streaming services, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, or you can go to this handy link here, dudissidents.com/bard, and that'll take you to a Linktree type page where you can find his music on your platform of choice. So that's Bard and the Guitar, the new album, Love Songs to My Favorite Politicians. Please do check it out and support our indie dissident sponsors. Okay, we will move right on along here. I think I got everything loaded in for this one. Let me just make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there we go. Cool. All right. So I didn't want to gloss over this story because there's been so much news here on our side of the ponds and elsewhere. But these attacks in the West Bank are certainly worth a story because they are really getting especially horrible, even by Israeli settler standards, which is, of course, the lowest of standards. Breaking from Ibab Hassan, Israeli settlers are now carrying out brutal attacks on the villages of Masafir in the West Bank, stealing hundreds of sheep, setting villages on fire, and assaulting residents. Here's some video. Now, Trump lifted the sanctions on these settlers, by the way, as soon as he took office. He decided that, the barest of minimums, of Joe Biden's presidency, which was putting sanctions on these people, was too punitive. And so they're doing this with our blessing now. Make no mistake about it. Jasper Nathaniel, who has visited the West Bank, we did a segment on him a while back where he got in between some villagers and some Israeli settlers who were raising the olive trees. And I don't want to say too much because I forget the exact details of his situation, but he had some horrible run-ins with the settlers himself over there. Massive settler attack unfolding in Al-Halawa in Masafir. At least 40 settlers attacking people, torching property, and blocking ambulances. Many injuries. And once again, to remind people, there is no Hamas in the West Bank. So the excuse that this is necessary somehow, they don't even bother making. This is just, their land, and this is what they do to people who are on it. They steal their livestock, they burn their crops, they destroy their homes. This is just their MO as a matter of routine. Now, this video I can't show you on YouTube because it would certainly get this video age restricted, which would mean no one would really be able to see it. The horrifying assault on our friend Abu Ayyub in the village of Fakit, as captured by security cameras. Abu is currently hospitalized with a fractured skull after undergoing emergency surgery during the night. So there's Abu standing in the middle of that camera shot there, in the blue shirt, not bothering anybody. And then within seconds, this mob of Israeli settlers just surrounds him and starts beating on him. You could watch that on X if you want. I can't show it to you here, but that's something you can expose yourself to if you feel that you should. It is extremely difficult to watch, of course. We are reliving the Nakba. A Palestinian community says it's been erased as Israeli settler violence intensifies. Finally, an American press outlet decided to report on this. So this is from CNN. Suleiman Gawanmeh is tired of talking. For over 10 years, he talked himself hoarse until he realized his words could not save his community from being driven out. After his final appeal for help came to nothing, he too left. I am angry with the world. Nobody listens to us. It's as if we are not human beings, he told CNN. His village of Ras Ain al-Awha in the occupied West Bank has now been erased, emptied of its Palestinian residents after a years-long campaign of relentless settler harassment that has intensified over the past 2 years. The ongoing violence against what was once, the largest shepherding community in the West Bank increased markedly this month, forcing families to abandon their homes, according to Israeli human rights group B'Tselem. Armed and masked settlers, many of them teenagers, descended on the Ras Ain al-Awha daily, residents and activists say, terrorizing the nearly 120 extended families, more than 800 people in total, who live there. By the end of January, that harassment forced them all to leave. And so there's a photo. A Bedouin man gathers plastic sheeting as families begin to gather their belongings to leave their homes after continued harassment from Israeli right-wing settlers near the city of Jericho in the Israeli-occupied Palestinian West Bank on January of this year. A lot of Christian imagery. I mean, you're a Christian, Jose. I'm not, but it's got to hit especially hard seeing. I mean, what was we had Alex Jones's son on the show a week ago.
I know he reached out to me saying he wants to do an interview, and then he goes.
Oh,
to me.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, he's a great guy. I would recommend definitely hooking up with him. But he said they've turned Jesus's homeland into a graveyard, right? I mean, as a Christian, to see this, it's got to hit especially hard. Any comment on that before we continue? I have more.
There's so many different angles that you can take this from. I think first of all, if people haven't seen it, the movie The Settlers by Louis Theroux is very good right now because he just gets them in their own words. He doesn't add any commentary, anything like that. He asks questions, and like he just gets the worst of people like Ben Gvir and these other people who just say, "No, this is our land." They're just on it. We have a right to this land, and they don't even call it the West Bank. They don't call it Palestine. They call it Judea and Samaria. That's how insane this ideology is. And that's the thing that, is such a problem because that ideology influences Beitar. Beitar calls itself a Jabotinskyite organization. That Jabotinsky is one of their founders. Jabotinsky was writing books in 1896, I think, is when he first publishes his book on Zionism, where he says, Jews need to stop being bullied around the world and need to stop being weak, and they need to form this sort of sphere of this triangular sphere where they decide, we're going to fight back and we're just going to reclaim our land, and that's what Zionism is. And as a result, there's been this massive coordinated campaign to link Judaism to Zionism. Now, and that has permeated here in the United States. Like, Beitar, for example, which, has its operations here in New York, although apparently they've disbanded in New York and have moved to Delaware, which, again, I don't really believe it. But the people who own Richie Torres, have those settler beliefs. They genuinely believe there is no such thing as a West Bank or Palestine, that it's all Judea and Samaria, and they all have a right to own that land. And that's why Richie Torres goes onto the floor of Congress and he mentions Israel 300 or 200% more, 236% more than he does the Bronx. Because now you can tell who he's actually speaking on behalf, or who's he speaking on behalf for. And, I see those images of those poor people who are, being driven out of their home where they've been there for generations. And I just think, God, the free pass that this administration has given them. No, we have to first of all, an immediate solution I would think would be to send UN peacekeepers. And if I was the president, I would send the military over there and I would say, no, we're going to respect 67 borders. And a lot of these settlers are going to suddenly find themselves in Palestine and they're going to have 48 hours to evacuate. And if they don't, they're going to find themselves in Palestine. And whatever comes with that, that's what that means, because that's what it's going to take. That's what a humane government would do. And these people like Ben Gvir and Netanyahu have to be prosecuted. And they have to be prosecuted somewhere. I want to believe in the ICC, but how is it going to execute its warrants? I think that Yeah, there needs to be some kind of mass intervention, and I think that we need not just a change of leadership, but a change in thought as well, because the change in thought from the American people is what will allow the change in leadership. I just look at those images and I just think that that's just completely heartbreaking that the world allows this to go on, and it's been going on since even before October 7th. It's been going on for decades.
Oh yeah, well, this has nothing to do. I mean, this is the West Bank. This has nothing to do with Hamas. This has nothing to do with October 7th. This is just a decades-long project. It is really just incredible when you think about this country, which really presents itself as a beacon of freedom and democracy and Western values, quote unquote. This is what that really means in real life, right? This is the reality of all of that, and we have more, and there's more imagery here I'll get to. Gowan May, 44, and his family were the last to go on Sunday. We didn't get displaced because a shepherd or a settler attacked us. No, the issue is bigger than that. The shepherd is a tool, a means of the occupation, he said. Ras Ain al-Awha is the 46th shepherding community in the West Bank to be forcibly displaced since October 7, 2023, according to Bet Selam, which calls this a form of ethnic cleansing. So this is a video that they did about this. This is both on their Facebook and it's circulating on X as well. In 2025, Israeli authorities demolished at least 1,267 Palestinian structures in the West Bank, including East Peninsula. As a result, 1,454 Palestinians were displaced from their homes. Israel bans almost all Palestinian construction and development in areas under its control, and then demolishes homes claiming they were built illegally, effectively driving Palestinians off their land. This policy is part of the ethnic cleansing Israel is carrying out in the West Bank. CNN, back to the article. Jewish settlers have been harassing the residents of Ras Ain al-Awha since 2010, according to members of the community. After the Hamas attacks of October 7th and the ensuing offensive in Gaza, residents say matters only worsened. Settlers have built 4 new illegal settlement outposts around the village since April 2024, according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, in closing in on Palestinian homes. According to residents, activists, and videos obtained by CNN, settlers believed to be from those outposts stole or damaged water tanks, compromising the community's access to water and undermining its livelihood. They cut electricity lines, stole thousands of livestock, and vandalized sheep pens and the Palestinian property, all with the support or inaction of the Israeli military. Omar Badar tweets out, "These are KKK pogroms in one of the most racist and murderous countries on the planet. But because the victims are Palestinian, you won't see this on the news. One day our children will ask us why we kept funding the monstrous Israeli regime." Hear, hear. This is an especially gutting video. At the request of the illegal Havat Mound settlers, Israeli forces detained 5 Palestinian children aged 8 to 12 for gathering wild vegetables and flowers near the settlement. Not for throwing rocks, not for acting up, for gathering vegetables and picking flowers. Imagine arresting a child for picking flowers. Like, it's almost, it's the kind of evil that you don't even find in storybook villains. Literally arresting children for gathering vegetables and flowers. Here's this video.
איך לוקחים ילדים? איך לוקחים ילדים הקטנים? איך לוקחים ילדים? קטנים בגלל מתנחלים מחפת מעון. בגלל מתנחלים מחפת מעון. רק ילדים, מה זה? תתביישו.
So to be clear, this is a kidnapping that we're seeing now. This is an abduction of children by a Nazi Gestapo force. And you want to say I'm an anti-Semite for saying that, you can go to hell. Like, well, this is what you're witnessing here. You're witnessing a Nazi kidnapping of innocent children. That's exactly what this is. There's no parsing that. There's no other way to explain this. It's just absolute hell on earth. And this happens with our permission and with our blessing. Chris Van Hollen, Senator Chris Van Hollen, said violent settlers in the West Bank are burning Palestinian villages and beating residents with impunity. These attacks have been met with silence from the Trump administration and the Netanyahu government. U.S. taxpayers shouldn't be given to the Netanyahu government an annual $3 billion blank check for weapons. Well, you know, your own Democratic Party has been, for the most part, silent about this as well. Van Hollen has put himself out there more than most, which is why I featured him, because he is the only politician who I've seen. I'm not saying he's the only one who's called this out, but he's the only one who I've seen who has called this out. But, you know, when you see reports like this, you see videos like that of 8-year-olds being dragged to jail away from their families for gathering vegetables and flowers. You really just can't help but reckon with just the rank immorality of this country and of the whole Western order. And the idea that people who criticize this need to be on the defensive against charges of anti-Semitism is just completely perverse, just absolutely embarrassing. Anything to add to that, my friend?
Yeah, I think about the 5-year-old who was just taken by ICE. His name is Liam Conejo Ramos, and he was taken by ICE just a few days ago. I think a judge blocked the deportation order yesterday, but, you know, the illegal abductions and the kidnapping that happens over there, like the video you just saw, is exactly what's happening here.
Yeah.
And it only makes it much more disgusting to know that Richie Torres supported the Lake and Riley Act, which is what gave ICE the autonomy to do these kind of abductions and kidnappings. And that if you tell him to his face, like Adam Friedland did, hey, look, there's this country that has the Star of David as its flag. And Adam Friedland says, you know, as a Jew, you know, I see this and I think maybe the largest purveyor of anti-Semitism is the people who are doing these violent acts of genocide and kidnapping of children under Judaism. Maybe they're the largest purveyors of anti-Semitism.
Right.
Richie Torres just goes, well, what are you, an anti-Semite? Wait, so you're justifying anti-Semitism? It's like, that's not the point. And it just goes to show you how disgusting the people are who personally profit off of this. I think about also the fact that Richie Torres personally profits. Every time we write a blank check to Israel, Richie Torres was investing in Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and L3Harris, which were some of the biggest military companies that were funding or that were giving the weapons and bombs to Israel. So as he's voting against ceasefire resolutions, as he's voting to continue funding Israel, he's making a personal profit. And for that, he says, I'm lying and I'm an anti-Semite and I'm a slanderous. I see the images that you just put out there. It goes to show you the responsibility that we have in this campaign in the Bronx office, you know, because that's what we're directly opposing. We're coming in here and we're saying we want to directly challenge the people who allow that injustice to happen every single day. And it goes to show, like, hey, you know, the weight that this upcoming election has. If we can actually unseat Richie Torres, that'll be the ultimate rebuke of this policy. It's one thing to win as a mayor of New York City, where, you know, you don't actually make the decisions on the apartheid state that's happening right now in Gaza. You don't make decisions on the funding of the Gestapo in Israel. You do make decisions about, you know, security here. But now this would be an ultimate rebuke about the Congress as a whole. If we can get rid of AIPAC's #1 darling, that'll be an ultimate rebuke. And it'll show that the American people are fed up and tired of those images that you just showed, whether it's over there in the West Bank, where they're abducting children just for plucking vegetables and fruits, or here, a 5-year-old who's in preschool, who ICE just abducts illegally. That's why people need to stand with us here in the Bronx. It's very important that we do this, right? Because if we want to fight back against that, they have to come here. and they have to stand with us. So, yeah.
All right. Well, the website is votevega.nyc. My friend, always great to see you. We will be in touch. I'll pick a day to come down there and help get some pens to paper, and we will announce that as the day draws nearer. I got to check schedules and things, but I'm sure if we got a week window, I'm sure we could work something out.
Yeah. By the way, every Saturday we'll be hosting an orientation. So the next few Saturdays we'll be hosting an orientation on petitioning, what it entails, when you can sign up, that kind of stuff. So definitely go to votevega.nyc to sign up and volunteer and donate.
All right, my friend. Always great to see you. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for helping out. Appreciate you as always. And we will be in touch very soon, as always.
Yeah, absolutely.
All righty. Jose Vega, everybody. Round of applause in the chat. See you next time, my friend. All right. Round of applause for Jose. Always good to talk to Jose. Quite the double bill today. Glenn Greenwald, Jose Vega. How do you like that, everybody? Thanks, everybody, so much for being here. I want to put our patron scroll up. We had a great post-game show. We will be doing 2 film clubs in February. We have to make an announcement about that. We were going to do one on Tuesday, but I just didn't want to risk it. Or I'm sorry, on Monday we were going to do one, but we just didn't want to risk having to cancel it because of the weather. Although it doesn't appear we lost any power, which is kind of a miracle. I mean, I really thought we were going to lose power. I mean, we got over 2 feet of snow, and there were National Grid trucks, coming up here in anticipation of power outages, and maybe there were in the area. I know there were some, but we certainly dodged that bullet. But we will be doing 2 in February, so you get those as a perk. You also get our post-game shows plus Q&As once a month. You get call-in access to every Q&A we do every Sunday night over on Rumble, and you get ad-free versions of every live stream emailed directly to you the day after they air live. So if you miss a show and you want to watch it back free of commercial interruption, you can do so. You get all that just for $5 a month, plus a shout out here on the scroll and a credit in our upcoming Uhuru documentary. Patrons also get credited at the end of our films. If you were a patron at the time we made the documentary on Jose, you were in the end titles of that film, and you will be in the end titles of this upcoming film as well. So patreon.com/do dissidents. It's a great way to support the show and keep us afloat. Patreon.com/do dissidents. All right. We will take some super chats and some Rumble rants here. Andy Gardner, I'm not licking anybody. Tim Pool, really quick quote. We all have a red line. That's true. We all have a red line. Wasim Ghorani, Israeli government just admitted that death toll from Hamas-governed health facilities that they said was lies, now admitted to be correct. Yeah, they finally admitted that the Gaza Ministry of Health number was the correct number. Of course, we know the reason they admitted 70,000 was the correct number is because the real number is probably 5 or 6 times that at least. Piers Morgan tweeted out, can you, something to the effect of, Israel supporters would, angrily insist that these were false numbers, and now they're saying they're true. Well, they're saying they're true now because the number's a lot higher, right? So that's their way of bargaining down. Mark P. Thicot, I'm home from work sick today, really sore throat. In hindsight, I should have skipped that felching conference. Mark P. Thicot suffered a felching injury. Well, what do you drink for that?
You drink dandelion root with some lemon and honey. That really soothes the felching pain. That's what I drink when it's been a long night of felching. Dandelion root, lemon and honey. And vitamin A. Don't forget vitamin A. Everything. Vitamin A cures everything. Let's see what else we got here. Mark P. Thicot says the EU today decided to designate the Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization because of their deadly nonviolence against peaceful demonstrations. At the same time, no action against the IOF. Of course. Yeah, they're getting. It's funny. I called Jose yesterday. I said, hey, you want to come on? We'll talk about the campaign, and we'll also talk about some of the news. Thinking there might be strikes on Iran to report on. It was looking like things were ratcheting up, but yeah, that's certainly one more step in that direction. Pardon me. Grass-Fed Cow says, really enjoying Keaton's music channel. Well, thank you, Grass-Fed Cow. Appreciate that very much. Yeah, if you are not subscribed to the music podcast is youtube.com/@shufflepod. That's my new music channel called The Shuffle. Got some fun stuff coming up on that channel. We're counting down the 5 best albums of 1990. I also just reviewed the Lucinda Williams album, the new Van Morrison album, and I got to get to the new Megadeth album too, because that's their last one. So I haven't listened to that whole thing yet. I'm only about 3 or 4 songs in, so I got to listen to the whole thing and get on that as well. But we've been having some fun over there. If the news has you down, then come over there to get away from it all for a few minutes every few days. youtube.com/@shufflepod. That's my music channel. Okay. Thank you, Grass-Fed Cow. Appreciate those words of encouragement. What else we got over here? Professor Brown Note says 40 years since Challenger and circumcised Cronkite Spirit. Here are 3 live TV moments in my time etched in our memory. 1989 Berlin Wall falls, 2001 World Trade Center collapses, 2025 Keaton shelf collapses. Yes, this one is much more stable than the other one. This is actually a very well-built piece of furniture. And 8 I am donating every month to the best candidate other than Diane. Can't wait to petition with everyone. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Good job. Thank you. Squire says, sorry, meant to send a $5 with my post. That's all right. It's all right. Don't worry about it. China Shale says one of Marx's first popular writings was about peasants being beaten and arrested for picking up dry sticks and twigs. Fairy tale villains are downright reasonable compared to in real life villains. Good point, China Shale. Thanks very much for that. Hey, folks, one more word from one of our sponsors here. The Grifter's Bible is a mind-bending novel by El Shabooms, and it's now a free weekly series on YouTube with a soundtrack by Monumental Sonic Architecture. Follow the First Electric Church of Jesus Christ as they combine the bleeding edge of black patented neuroscience with the state-of-the-art in Michigan to beat the Great Recession. They sell visions of God to the huddled masses of Deep Ellum, Texas, and the money pours in until the local competition, the police, and the U.S. Navy decide to put a stop to it. There's ass whoopings, car chases, and a showdown at high noon on Good Friday in Dodge City. It's sci-fi noir. It's a picaresque thriller. It's a Western from 10 minutes in the future. It's The Grifter's Bible, a film series by El Shabooms with a soundtrack by Monumental Sonic Architecture. New episodes are posted every Monday at youtube.com/@El Shabooms. So please go and check that out. And do check out my esteemed colleague's channel, youtube.com/@RussOnTheRoadNYC. He just put out a really cool video from Thailand, which is about 20 minutes long. So one of the longer form pieces, which was really good. So you get to be up to date on Russ's travel adventures. He is in Laos right now. I think he is on a boat right now. It's like a couple day long boat ride. So that's why he couldn't be here today. But as I understand, he is only due to miss one more show between now and April when he goes to China, and that will be a couple of Sundays from now. So we got some great guests in the works for Sunday. Peter Hagar from Revolutionary Change will be one of them, and we will have likely 1 or 2 more as well. So thanks everybody very much for being here. Make sure you are subscribed. Thank you to the YouTubers. Thank you to the Rumblers. Thank you to the moderators for keeping the peace in the chat. And thanks, of course, to our 2 wonderful guests for holding it down today, Glenn Greenwald and Jose Vega. Thanks, both of those fine gentlemen, for coming on. Always great to talk to both of them. We will see you all back here Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, thanks everybody very much for being here today. Please do smash that like button on the way out. Smash that subscribe button on the way out. Smash that follow button over on Rumble. If you don't have a Rumble account, create a Rumble account and follow us. I talked with Glenn about that. Glenn was one of the OG Rumble creators. It really is an important platform. So if you're watching us over there, but you don't have an account, create one and smash that follow button. On YouTube, do the same thing. Smash that subscribe button. And we will see you all Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, thanks, everybody, for spending the afternoon with us. Be safe and be well. Courage.
Please clap.